You are listening to episode 155 of Mitolife Radio. I'm Matt Blackburn, and today we have the legend Atom Bergstrom returning to the show. Adam is definitely one of the most interesting people that I know. Every time I speak with them, I learn not only one or two new things, but multiple new things. And a lot of those things I could actually utilize and apply directly to my life immediately to make an immediate change. And that's what I love about the information that he's sharing. A lot of it is free, and he often recommends very simple solutions that don't cost anything to get immediate results, using things like reflexology and who's the matter instead of what's the matter, and color therapy, wearing certain colors on certain days, which I think he mentions in this show, and so many cool things that we just never think about. And I really like thinkers in the alternative health community that are outside of the box, because there's so much information that's being regurgitated right now, and the people saying they're not regurgitating information are absolutely doing it because they're just parroting the party line of keto, intermittent fasting, autophagy, all of these things we hear over and over again without actually going deeper and talking about lipofuscinosis. Like Adam has written over 12 books on yellow fat disease. And that's a great resource for people that ask, what do you mean omega-3s are healthy? It's been proven that they're healthy, they're essential. But in fact, they're not. And what's worse is they're actually harmful. And in his books, Adam provides proof of that. He has multiple sources linking progressive lipofuscinosis with tons of different disease conditions that you wouldn't think are related to omega-3 toxicity. Or as he says, HUFAs, highly unsaturated fatty acids, docosahexaenoic acid, icosapentaenoic acid, and alpha-linolenic acid with an N for no. Those are really the ones to watch out for. And there's a difference between supplements, extracts, and oils and whole foods. It's really the concentrates that cause problems, or going on a heavy seafood diet like every day, which I've seen personally causing health problems in people with the excess amounts of DHA. So enjoy the show. Here is Atom Bergstrom. All right, Atom Bergstrom, welcome back to the show.
Here I am. Good to see you, Matt.
Good to see you too. Yeah, we were talking about Master Chen before we started recording, and I'm going to try to say this word, Anthropomaximology.
Yeah, the Russians invented a science, basically. They wanted to know the extremes that the human body could take. And Donald Lay told me about this at one time, that there was a Russian guy that could work 17 times faster than anybody else by using efficiency. And I thought that was a fiction at first, because that just seemed fantastic. Someone comes in and works 17 times faster, but it's on the internet. You can find this guy, his name and everything. So those type of things exist. We, as Adano said, we sell ourselves short. And when Chen came to this country, he basically escaped from China. Sword fights, all kinds of things right out of the, what is that, those movies, the dragon movies and all that, you know. But when he got here, he couldn't speak English. He learned by watching the news on TV, and then he got a job at McDonald's. Well, he was so good, he could do the job with 3 employees. So he said he used Tai Chi to make the burgers. He was so good, they offered him a job to open up the largest McDonald's in China, which he turned down because he was sent here by his master, who lived to 129 years, by the way, 130 if you do the Chinese method of from conception to death. And he was told to open up the Wudang Tai Chi and Qigong for the West. So he was committed and still is to doing that. And
Wow. Did
he's
Adano study under
located
him?
both in Colorado and now in California.
Oh, wow. What did he have a relationship to Adano Lay at all? Or?
Only on a metaphysical level, because I'm going to tell you a weird story that really blew my mind when it happened. Years ago, let me get the year straight, 1987, Adano showed me a chart with a martial artist with a figure eight, sideways figure eight, the infinity sign over his waist. And I said, what is that? And he said, it's something the martial artists use. So I became fascinated with trying, what the heck was that? And I investigated the enteric nervous system. That's the closest I could get. I read books on it. I went through medical libraries trying to figure this out. 30 years later, I'm with Chen. And I did all these workshops for free because I happened to be the watchman at this ranch in Texas. And there I was. He came in the door. He taught the workshop. So he just let me participate. But anyway, he drew the same chart, basically, more complicated. So I thought, oh my God, that's what Adano wouldn't show me. Chen is showing me what he didn't show me. So Chen then looks at me and says, Adam's been waiting for this information for 30 years. Now, that blew my mind. So then he said a strange thing. He said, funny, I haven't taught this for 30 years. So I didn't think much of it until I had an epiphany in the shower about 3 days later. Wait a minute. At 10 years old, Chen was sent with summer clothing to walk through 3 provinces of China in the winter and survive. He was 10 years old. He wasn't teaching anybody. He was surviving. Yeah, he had to go in summer clothes, basically. And interesting enough, an egg saved his life, which is, Adano is famous for his story of discovering solar nutrition by eating an egg in the morning. It disagreed with him. An egg at midday disagreed with him, worked fine at night. And then he did the same thing the second day. And the third day, the nurse reported him to the doctor because he was in the hospital for falling off a building. He was in the hospital for 1 year and 9 months because just about every bone in his body had been broken. So anyway, the doctor said, what are you doing? He said, I noticed there's a time factor in eggs. So the doctor let him continue his research, and that is the birth of solar nutrition, according to Adano anyway. So, but anyway, Chen somehow was connected. Who knows? And there were other stories like that too, where he definitely can read minds and even possibly be in 2 or 3 locations at the same time.
Wow. Yeah, when you mentioned the figure 8, it made me think of I think it's called the flower of life symbol, and some people are saying that's like a distortion or something. It's like based on, I don't know if you've looked into this rabbit hole, like base 10 mathematics instead of base 12. So it's like a consumption energy instead of a expansion. So it's like something eating something. I don't know.
I've seen some of that. They also have this flower of life from Drumbelow Melchizedek, who I actually know. Greg Braden basically got his start by borrowing Drumbelow's work. And I particularly hung out with Drumbelow at one point, and I'm a bit suspicious of a lot of his work. He's from up in Sedona a lot. So anyway, but there's something to it. The figure 8 itself, the infinity sign, is a way of getting eternal energy. So how that works and how to tap into it and how Chen uses it for the, if it's the enteric nervous system, whatever it is, it does exist. We have 4 nervous systems: a sympathetic, a nervous system, a parasympathetic, and we have an enteric, and we actually have a subdermal system below our skin. Our adrenal glands are the medulla. The center of the adrenal gland is actually mostly in the skin. And this is something forgotten for almost 100 years now, 100 years, because GE scientists of all people researching light discovered that it was, and that every cell that contained, let me see, phenylalanine, and what's the other derivative of it? Anyway, those
Tryptophan?
two in your cell, what is it?
Is it tryptophan, maybe?
No, it's not tryptophan, it's phenylalanine, and phenylalanine has something it develops too that isn't really an essential amino acid, and I've forgotten what it is now. But anyway, those cells all are adrenal cells, and so you can get energy from the sun. We get testosterone from the sun, we get vitamin D from the sun, and every plant almost on the planet and animal can get vitamin D from the sun.
Yeah, that's one of the things that has always stood out to me when you mentioned that on my podcast, that the adrenals are mostly in the skin, because I played with light therapy and sunbathing over the years, and I definitely feel like an immediate stress reduction. It's like within seconds, not even minutes, of exposing my full body to light. It's really amazing. It makes total sense.
It really works. And the person who worked most of that out is, let me see his name, Colonel Gadiali, Dinshaw Gadiali. He was a colonel in the U.S., in the New York police force, a pilot, one of the first pilots they had. He was a pioneer in the cinema industry in India, and he developed color therapy in the United States and was put in jail for it because a lot of people were adopting it, that you could actually expose yourself to a certain amount of color and get rid of certain conditions. Because as Donald Lay pointed out to me, what we call the aura is actually the colors that we reject. Just like if you see a green plant, they don't absorb green. That's why it looks green to us. It's rejecting it. Well, the same with the human body. A clear person is clear. They don't have an aura. You can't see an aura around them. They have a strong force field, but not a colored aura. So O'Donnell used to look at people's auras and tell what the problem was by the colors they rejected, or simply the unconscious would often operate. All you had to do is say, what color do you think of when you think of your injury? And 9 out of 10 times you would get a hit that way to find out what the problem was. Red is a moving trauma, orange is a sexual trauma, yellow is a decision trauma, et cetera, for all the colors. They have a group, what do you call it, a major trauma. There are other spin-off traumas because we have many shades of traumas. But a very strange thing, we see 10,000 colors, but how come we only limit it to about 20? And in fact, most civilizations limit it to about 10 or 12, really, and everything's a spin-off of it. We even say, 6 or 7 colors, or all that Western science will give it. Even Newton knew better than that, and Galileo.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things I heard from Istok Bentov. Before he died, he said that we used to see more colors, and now we see less, or something, or the opposite. Something in terms of the evolution of human consciousness. He's saying basically the nervous system evolves, and that evolves our senses so we can experience more. But we can actually de-evolve too, so it goes both ways, right?
Primitive civilizations only have names for a certain amount of colors. In fact, the more primitive, the less colors. They black and white. Red comes in next, is the next one they can see. And then it's yellow or green. And then it has a certain view. That's been written up extensively, even by Oswald Spengler that's over 100 years ago. In his Decline of the West goes into color therapy and why cultures can see it and some can't see colors. So there really is a science. And the thing is, the word gets in the way of the color. So it's interesting. There's an area, it may be called Broca's area in the brain, where the colors and the words are together. Have you ever seen those postcards, or sometimes it's on the internet? You have the color red, but it's painted the color green. And then you have the color green and it's painted yellow. And your job is to quickly say give the color in the middle of the word. Well, most people trip up because they have confused the word with the color. And that's why color is a trauma. we get colored of a trauma, and we get cleared of a trauma, and we get transparent, which is the parent's trauma that is passed on to us for at least 3 generations. This is a physical thing as well as a biblical thing and a scientific reason behind it too.
I wonder if that's why some people avoid the sun and like don't go outside. Like my parents live in Asian country in Southern California. It's like an Asian population. And what I've observed from them walking on the sidewalk is they always have an umbrella, really dark sunglasses, and they're just kind of like not all of them, but a lot of them are living like vampires, like trying to block every photon of light hitting their eyes or their skin. And I wonder if on a subconscious level, they know that the sunlight would heal them, not with hormone D, but from trauma, right?
It's possible. Now, certain foods have carbon dioxide and can give you resistance to that. I've talked about the man who actually was buried for 40 days. But to get like that, he had to eat nothing but donkey milk and live in a cave and never be exposed to the sun, only come out at night. And there's a famous monk, a woman in Tibet, maybe. She was in a cell, not exposed to any sunlight for like 37 years. So obviously we can get by without vitamin D, but frankly, just to be on the safe side, I go out in the sun or expose my food to the sun or eat things like eggs and dairy that has some vitamin D in it anyway.
Well, you have me thinking because I think moving is stressful in general. I just moved from Idaho to Colorado, but I was trying to point out like why I was feeling fatigued and overly stressed. And I thought it was the EMFs because there's like 20 Wi-Fi signals here versus Idaho. There was like none. But you made me think about the color, and the walls at this house are painted. There's a lot of like gray and light blue. So I wonder if at a psychological level, that's a stress to my body for some reason.
Can make a difference. Gray is a mother trauma and blue is a depression trauma. So they can, in fact, the trauma vehicles in use blue light anyway. They use blue light because they know it stops the bleeding. Now, Dinshaw Gaudiali had that down, how to promote bleeding, how to make it stop and everything. And I'll tell you an interesting story about color therapy. Years ago, when I lived with a girlfriend above Adano's school in Houston, Texas, a cat was at the doorstep, a little kitty cat. So my girlfriend, we got to save it and everything. Take it to the vet and see what happens. So the vet said, no chance to heal this cat because it's got, I don't remember the name of the disease, but the guy assured us that grown cats don't survive this disease. This kitty hasn't got a chance. So anyway, I came home with the kitty and my girlfriend says, no, we've got to do something. So I said, color therapy works. Let's find out what this kitty needs. So there's a way where you can substitute a person and basically, what is the name of that? Where basically my girlfriend was put into the cat's place and we could test for certain colors. The 2 colors we had were green and orange. We had a green bulb. We didn't have an orange bulb. So what I did is the Gaudiali way or the Adano Lay way of using Gaudiali therapy. I put the cat in the dark and turned the green light on for 5 minutes. Then I turned it off for 5 minutes. Then I turned it on for 5 minutes. Then I turned it off. Within a half hour, the cat threw up and was perfectly okay. I took it back to the vet, and the vet was dumbfounded. He said, how can this be? This cat should be dead. So anyway, cat got his shots, and we had that kitty for a while.
That's incredible. Yeah, my 2 cats are actually sleeping in my office as we speak, one in each corner. And it's funny, they're different personalities. Like my little one, he's fine sitting right next to my Tesla coil that like has an arc rod that like arcs electricity off the top of it. It's really loud, and he just sits there and absorbs it. And my other cat, she runs away. That scares her.
They know energy. When people are injured, they often come up with their paws and do that little thing with their paws on the spot that's injured. And Ray Peat, you may have heard this, he talks to his cats. He claims they can speak English. And somehow that disproves Noam Chomsky's theory of language. But he says he proved to his girlfriend that the cats understood him and would do everything he said when he talked to them in English. So,
wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm still on the hunt for good cat or dog food. I think the closest is like, letting cats hunt birds and stuff outside and feeding dogs like raw meat. But all the store-bought stuff is garbage. It all contains herring oil or salmon oil or fish oil. Like every single one I've seen, dry or wet.
Yeah. Here's the funny thing. The vets know about yellow fat disease. Anyone who takes care of cats you can go to a vet, he'll know what yellow fat disease is. But they don't quite understand. Many of them will tell you, though, don't eat tuna. They know tuna can kill a cat. So now the tuna you get in cat food, that's not tuna. You're not in any danger from that. But then the vets don't understand that DHA is omega-3. They think that the DHA is in omega-3. What it is, it's one form of 3-chain carbon omega-3s. So they don't get it. So since then, they're advertising it's healthy to put DHA in your cat food, something they didn't do before. And now basically they're giving them to real tuna. So you'll find a lot more cats that have these lumps in their skin and things like that from that particular thing. So of course, you can give vitamin E to your cat too, because if that's all you can get, you better do something to prevent that sort of thing, because you are aging the cats as well as any animal on Earth by giving them the omega-3 oils, whether DHA, EPA, ALA, whatever.
Yeah, Adam, I need to go back and revisit your yellow fat disease books. But while we're on this topic, and we just covered light, I think it was the website Science Direct, but I've seen it on a few others that talked about, and this always blows my mind. I've been meditating on this ever since you introduced me to yellow fat disease. That lipofuscin is autofluorescent, so it has an excitation wavelength between 320 and 480, and an emission wavelength between 460 and 630, which is interesting. I think people overlook that whole aspect of health, that we kind of glow different depending on what we have in our body, especially if that thing is lipofuscin, right?
Right. There's an author who wrote a book called Into the Light. And I avoided that because I thought it was some kind of astral projection book or something from the New Age, until I met a guy in near San Diego who was a longevity specialist. He was wrong about certain things, about hormones and things, but he had that book there, and I became fascinated with it. And I've been doing a lot of research on that subject in medical journals, phototherapy books, and all these kind of things. And so he saved a lot of time, because it's really a good book. One of my friends on Facebook that I think listens to your show may be listening to this, and he can give you the information of what the man's name is. Because my books, since our evacuation, they're all scattered all over the place here. We still haven't gotten all straightened out from 2016 and 2017.
Is it that Shraver guy or something? There's a guy that always comments on your stuff. Is it John, the older guy that?
I think he's got a name like Pierre or something like that.
Okay.
With a P. Great. We disagree on subjects, but he's a very smart guy. I really admire the guy.
Okay. Yeah. On Patrick's show, you said. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that was it.
Sorry, we kind of overlapped there. Yeah, on Patrick's show, you mentioned a guy that always that friendly debates you, and I think he debates me on my post too.
Steve Shiver,
Right,
Dr. Steve Shiver, the Wizard of Houston, and he's the guy that introduced me to Adrenals. He walked in the Phoenix Metaphysical Bookstore that I managed, and right away I realized this guy knew stuff I didn't do, and I wanted to learn it. So I kind of tricked him. I said, I can get this book for you called Born to be Magnetic. And so, give me your number, please. That ended up with him doing workshops at the Metaphysical Bookstore, across the street at a center. And Friday night gatherings every night at my girlfriend and I, our apartment, where we would eat and learn solar, because that's when I first discovered it. And we would talk till dawn, and he would work on certain patients for $9 a treatment. He was a chiropractic student, so he wasn't supposed to be really doing sessions. But anyway, I learned a lot from him before I ever met Adonal. And finally, I realized most of his information is coming from Adonal, or a lot of it. And he introduced me to Adonal.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Well, I was glancing at your solar timing website, and I noticed you released yellow fat disease Q&A, and I haven't read it yet, but one of the sections made me laugh. It's people versus cruise people. I think I know that well at this point because I was in both camps.
Here's the humor of the universe. My last wife is back in college now. We've been separated for 2 decades or so. So she does a blog called Melted and Blown, Etched and Lit. That's been on the internet for 20 years. But I was reading that now she's back getting a graduate degrees and all kinds of things in college, which she wasn't before. And she just discovered how valuable omega-3 fatty acids are on walnut oil and linseed oil and everything. And I was really amused at what different planets we're on now, because she was just raving about how good it was for you. It could expand your brain and protect you from Crohn's disease. And guess what? Crohn's disease, this is a fairly recent discovery, is brown bowel disease. They now know that what they call brown bowel disease, caused by lipofuscin, caused by omega-3s, is really a more advanced state of brown bowel disease. So basically, it's undiagnosed Crohn's disease. There are so many of these dementia-type diseases, from even autism, but all the dementias, the Alzheimer's, the Parkinson's, all of those actually are highly associated with yellow fat disease, and are formed actually.
Wow. Yeah, my plumber in Idaho, he has Crohn's disease, and I was trying to help him out with magnesium bicarbonate, and I told him to eat egg yolks and stuff, but I'll have to let him know that it's brown bowel disease. I think he'll find that interesting. I was listening to you in an interview, and you said you used to have, was it a bloody anus and stuff from, was it flax oil? And
one of the things that happened, solar really improved my health dramatically when I switched that. And I kind of taught people it isn't what you eat, but when you eat. And that's largely true. But if you go too far off the norm and start eating the amounts of mayo I would do and the amounts of tuna I did, there's another story. Because just about the time I discovered Ray Peat, and I had moved to Montecito, I had episodic incidents of edema, where my ankle on the one side was always a little larger than the other one. But then it would suddenly get the rhino type of basket type of foot. It would get big. And then I was really, I'm on the way out. I've seen people get this, and it's really serious. You're hard and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Also, I'd gotten petechia. There are these little purple underskin bruises from easy bruising. And then if I bump things with my elbow, I have a big bruise there that I didn't get before. And my mother had gotten that before she died. So now I was really concerned. And then if I wiped my butt, I had to always wet the tissue because it would bleed. And then my gums, if I took a section of an orange and shoved it up against my mouth, be red, Technicolor. Well, once I got rid of the tuna, started eating orange, ate a lot of sugar, and added more salt, today I can wipe my butt with sandpaper. It doesn't matter. I can abuse it. I can take a piece of fruit and slap it against my teeth, no bleeding. And the petechia, they've been gone since 2016. The edema not only went away completely, but the one ankle is now smaller than the other ankle. They're both back to normal. And some of my varicose veins that I'd collected before were actually fading and turning lighter colors as they go. And we'll see how that works. One of my legs particularly cleared up quite a bit. So I really have to say, by cherry picking Ray Pete, because I certainly haven't bought into his entire program, but he saved my life. So, of course, he's a valuable guy to me. And I really, really like the way his brain works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here. And I think that's a sign of a balanced individual to not have to agree 100% with a mentor. I think that's so beautiful. And that's how I am with Morley and everyone. I think it's a great thing. I think that's kind of how it should be.
It is, because we didn't come with a manual to show exactly what's going on here. And look at Charlie Munger. He's as crusty and outspoken at 97 as he ever was. He's not in a wheelchair or anything, and he lives on Diet Coke and peanut brudel. So, Kissinger's still alive at 97. So I think longevity is a very important factor I really believe that having a successful life, whether you have money or not, because here in Montecito, I'm not on the class with these people, but there are billionaires all over the place here. And you look at the obituaries, dies at 105. Look at Kirk Douglas, dies at 102, I think. His wife dies at 101. So when you're taken care of, the other thing is you have a lot of live-in maids and butlers here. They tend to live over 100 because they don't have any worries. They don't have to pay bills or, I got to go get this, I got to go get that. Oh, my boss will take care of it. So there's a lot to be said about stress being a killer. And I advise people, if you're more worried about, you have to eat something that has omega-3s in, you're best to eat it than worry about it, because the worry will probably kill you before the omega-3 will.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think more people need to hear that. And you mentioned wetting toilet paper, and if you're eating, you might want to take a break from eating. No, but I'm curious if you've heard of I was wondering if you've heard of this, Adam. So Dr. Lawrence Wilson is like the near infrared bulb guy, and he has a website where he has all these articles on health protocols, and a lot of them, is like DIY, build your sauna with those chicken bulbs. And he has some interesting coffee protocols on his site. One of them was literally dipping your testicles in a cup of coffee for 30 minutes. He called it there's literally penis coffee is the article. I was like, would that work? But the reason why I brought that up is he had a bidet protocol where he said you shoot your anus for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. So I forget if it was a prostate effect or a cleansing effect. I think he said it was better than an enema, but curious if you heard of any of that stuff. I thought I'd heard every protocol till I read some of those.
I have heard about that. And interesting enough, I've known him for a long time. I'm out of touch with him now, but at one point, my co-author, Marcella von Harting of the Yes No Maybe book, he was a distributor for Young Living Oil under her. So he was there every day practically, and he took my solar workshop long time ago. Then, when I first met Vaughn, someone had given me his book about the time I was just meeting him. And I was going to go out on a houseboat, is how I met my co-author. So I thought, this is a perfect time. I can just be on a houseboat for the week or whatever we were going to be there and read his book. Well, they were so interested in solar nutrition that they wanted me to do workshops on the houseboat. So I did Solar 1, I did Solar 2. And finally, my friend Marcella von Harting is very practical. She said, look, we're an average American family. We have all kinds of food on this boat, health food, junk food, all kinds of things. You show us how to eat this in time, and we're going to eat it. So we ate solar on the houseboat, and one woman who only went to the bathroom one time a week started going on a daily basis. And all kinds of other things changed too, including Vaughn's husband, Jim Harting, who told me, I have a problem. My heels are bleeding on my bottom of my feet. And so I said, stick out your tongue. It was bright red. I said, you're over alkaline. At that time, they were vegetarians, and they had a chain of Burger Kings. So I said, you need to eat some of your own product. Now, Vaughn had a white tongue. She could get by fine. So anyway, he ate a little meat, and the problem went away. It came back later for other reasons. I can go into the alkaline tide. But anyway, they were so impressed, I became buddies. And it was either live in Sedona and pay rent or come back in their place in Paradise Valley. They had lived there for free. So guess what? So anyway, we became really good friends. And Jim went on cosmic vacation recently, a very big trauma for me. It was a few months ago, but I'm still very good friends with Vaughn, who is my co-author and actually bugged me to do that book over and over and said, if you don't do it, I'm going to do it, by God. But she was so interested in how it worked.
Wow. So you mentioned white tongue. I think they call that thrush. Is a white tongue like being overly alkaline?
Well, it's over acid. Over alkaline is when you have a red tongue and it's cracked. Now this is here's the problem with that type of layperson's diagnosis. Sometimes in yin and yang, and people have trouble understanding this, something can become so something it becomes the other. That's why in the East, enlightenment is at 11 o'clock. Because if it was at 12, what happens 1 second later? You're on the way down, right? So here in winter, you're on the way up 1 minute after the winter solstice. So the same kind of thing. And generally, this is a general rule. A person who is over acidic will have a white tongue. They can have a heel problem. It's unlikely, but it will ooze and they'll have a lot of mucus come out. A person who's over alkaline won't have any mucus, will have the cracks very dry. Their tongue will be red, bright red and cracked, and they'll have a dry cough like that. And that's the indication they're too alkaline. So years ago, when I was really eating perfect solar, I came to Adrenal and I complained. I said, I've been eating perfect. What is this dry cough here? He said, stick out your tongue. And I did. He said, go have a donut and coffee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I thought, what? So I went to his assistant, Marcia, and I said, Adrenal just told me to go have a donut and coffee at 3 o'clock. She said, stick out your tongue. So I did. Yeah, go have it. I said, what is all this tongue business? That's when I first heard about it. Anyway, I went and had the donut and coffee, and the coughing stopped right after. Just did it once. That was it. So we can become too alkaline. People in the desert, alkaline is more serious. People where there's more humid problems, the alkaline person does well there because a alkaline person tends to get dehydrated. Look at alkali flats. Alkali flats, what are they? They're the desert. That's where all the stuff runs down. There's a very humorous book by, I won't mention the author, but some people will know about this. It's called Alkalize or Die. And that's why I wrote a rebuttal called Acidify or Die. Now, we need balance. I did it to just contradict that book particularly. And what it shows is a beautiful waterfall and beautiful mountains and everything. And that was supposed to be alkaline. And then it showed a dried up desert, and that was supposed to be acid. Well, anyone, if you really think about it, all the minerals run downhill. So all deserts almost exclusively are alkali flats, salton sea, you name it. The deserts are alkali. And up in the mountains, the trees make the soil so acidic that a lot of crops can't be grown under them. So it's exactly the opposite. And that was the inspiration for my book, Acidify or Die, because most people don't understand that acid alkalinity is not measurable in your urine, is not measurable in your saliva, and is not measurable in your sweat or blood because those are outside the body. They're not measuring the meat in your body. They're measuring the liquid. And it would be like, what's the acidity of the meat I'm eating? I'll measure the broth after I cook it. Makes no sense. But to a lot of people, they're measuring their alkalinity with the saliva will do it. And sometimes they have little tricks to adjust it. It doesn't work. In acid alkalinity, it has nothing to do with the blood unless you have overall fatal type of conditions that can kill you. So a lot of people say acid alkalinity is a fiction because they don't understand. It's not with the blood. If you tell a farmer asks, what acidity should I have my soil to grow my carrots versus my broccoli versus these vegetables? Oh, it doesn't make any difference. You think not? You'll be surprised. Some vegetables won't grow in a certain pH, and some either way a lot of times. Many times they tend to survive around the middle. But acidity alkalinity is a ridiculous measurement or not to be measured at that point. And many farmers take exact readings to get that right so they get the maximum crop. The same thing. You want an overall neat of your body, but then we are so well buffered that where does a disease start? At a place that isn't buffered anymore. So when you get a tumor or an ulcer, it's not buffered. So you have to take a Beckman pH meter and go in there and see what the pH is. And inevitably you find out it's not the same as the rest of the body because the reason it's sick, it's not buffered anymore. So measuring the buffered part of the body is ridiculous. You're not going to tell much, except sometimes, for instance, if you're over alkaline, it can help to be over alkaline if you have a one that doesn't metastasize. If you have a cancer that doesn't metastasize, you can alkalize because cancers grow in an acidic milieu, but they spread in an alkaline one. Basically, you have a tumor under acid conditions and an ulcer under alkaline conditions. So, which is oxygen, carbon dioxide versus oxygen. So if you have a cancer that metastasizes like breast cancer or ovarian cancer, you're screwing people when people go to someone and tells them, be alkaline for your cancer. You'll help the person that has bladder cancer and some other cancers, but breast cancer and ovarian, you're basically giving them a death sentence, speeding up the process of them leaving the planet. How do you alkalize quickly? Chemotherapy, fastest way to alkalize. Radiation, even faster. Radiation therapy makes you alkaline right away. Mm-hmm.
Wow. What about baking soda? Because they use sodium bicarbonate for cancer therapy too, right?
They do. And if you read Simoncelli, I forget this is the exact name, but if you read him, read where he fails and where he fails in the metastasizable cancers. So actually it can help if you've got one that doesn't metastasize, but he admits that his more advanced one, it doesn't work. And what he means by advanced is they metastasize. Because if you have a skin cancer that just sits there, some people can have 20, 30 skin cancers. Most skin cancers do not metastasize. You're not going to have any problem by being alkaline then. But if you have a melanoma or one of those that do metastasize, bye-bye. It's a quick trip out of here by following the advice of be alkaline. The universe is yin-yang. We need to know when we're acid. We need to know we're alkaline. And you can't tell that from the urine. You can by the meat. In other words, the tongue kind of shows you what the meat is doing. It can mislead. And the correct way to find out if you're acid or alkaline are the following ways. A measurement of your potassium inside the cell. A measure of the potassium outside the cell. A measure of the potassium totally in and out of the cell, the surface tension of the urine, the what else is it? The specific gravity of the urine, and then the acid alkalinity of up your nose. Those things can give you a reading, all of them put together. And the reason is, say someone says, oh, you're low on potassium. Where did they measure it? Did they measure it in the serum, where they often do, or did they measure it in the cell? Well, many times low potassium in the serum means it all is stuck inside the cell. And that's how cancers grow. So if you have a person with cancer will have as much as close to over 50%, I believe. I think it's 66% extra potassium inside the cell. And yet they'll be reading as deficient in potassium. You give more potassium, it even makes it worse. So the thing is to find out where the potassium is hiding. If it's in the serum, then you can have a heart disease. Since they mostly measure in the serum, the heart doctors often get that right. Oh, you might have a heart attack. But when I've known people who have done chemo, one time they called up and said, emergency, your potassium is really high. You have to come in immediately. I hung up the phone and said, don't go. And the tumor shrunk dramatically. But these doctors weren't going to go along with the program. I didn't tell them why. We just didn't show up. And they got back. Not only was the potassium had regulated back to normal, but the cancer had shrunk so dramatically they thought that they had beaten it. They didn't, unfortunately, because later they kept on doing their chemotherapy.
Wow. Yeah, lately I've been getting back into like PEMF, like pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And the big marketing for a lot of these companies is it improves the sodium potassium pump. But I was thinking, like, if Gilbert Ling's correct, but there's not enough energy to run that pump, then what is it actually doing? So maybe it's still doing something to sodium and potassium, but it's not involving the pump.
It does something. I've had trouble explaining that too, because my explanation of what the kidneys are, the kidneys can generate chi. How do they do it? The closest thing to a kidney is an electric eel. An electric eel has a so-called sodium pump that will run electricity. Only now through Ling and through Pete and to other people too. It's not just those two, those three. But there's a sodium pump cannot run. They have about 50 different pumps like that, and they don't run at all. I laugh because now my ex-wife is there in college learning all about these pumps that don't exist, I'm not saying anything, but she should be reading Gilbert Ling. And there's a whole bunch of other people that have science now as a religion. I mean, there's not much science left. And they destroyed science in 1946 when they went and collected all the information that half of the foods in the universe are antibiotic and half are biotic. We have a yin-yang for both. But they want us to know that, it only comes from a fungus in the laboratory. We can give you an antibiotic, but you can't get it out of chlorella in chlorella, or you can't get it out of any bit of chlorophyll or fat that's exposed to a certain amount of sunlight and a certain amount of oxygen. And guess what? They hid all that information. You cannot find how much oxygen and how much. So when you try to do an antibiotic outside, you're basically guessing. You could take too much or too little by exposing it too little or too much. I read all those old science articles, and I never could find the exact amount. You can still get chlorella out of chlorella, but I think you have to buy it as a drug. And you get a tiny bit out of eating chlorella at nighttime if the cell wall is broken down. But still, they have a whole science they're hiding from us that anybody with the proper information could go in their backyard and their garden and take care of all their antibiotic necessities and all their biotic necessities too.
Yeah. Was it you in an interview? I forget. I was recently hearing about chlorophyll and, spirulina and chlorella, and like they soak up things, or they like chlorophyll's, like I know it's a deodorizer, right? Like if someone has bad breath or body odor, chlorophyll will wipe that out.
Chlorophyll, people have to be careful on it because it has so much energy, you can get sunburn more easily. It's a solar interface, much like St. John's wort and certain things in bergamot and things like that can make you susceptible to the sun. So you need to control the amount of chlorophyll you have. It's interesting that most of the chlorophyll is going to be in the morning and the middle of the day when the sun is available. And you don't overdo it, though, because you can get in trouble that way, too. But yes, chlorophyll is a miracle molecule. Of course, magnesium, it's a porphyrin that contains magnesium. It's very valuable. And another thing about chlorophyll is, people that go to the health food store, what are they really buying when they buy a bottle of chlorophyll? They're buying lobster blood, fake lobster blood, because that's Cooper globin. The term Cooper globin is hard to find nowadays. It's the center of the copper in oysters and lobsters and things, because Star Trek has this race of people that have Cooper globin in their blood. So now they've changed the name to hemocyanin or some darn thing instead of Cooper globin, like there was hemoglobin, Cooper globin. And the Sea Squirt uses a vanadium thing, and it was like vanadium globin or something. That word is gone now too to history.
Yeah, my lady just had a escargot for the first time a couple nights ago, and I think that isn't that like the land version of the oyster. She said her brain lit up exactly like oysters.
Similar. I'm a chicken, so I've never eaten it.
Me neither.
Have you, Vibrant Gal? Vibrant Gal, she's been to France. She's eaten snails. I have a buddy of mine who told me, I'm never going to eat anything that leaves a trail.
She offered one. I couldn't do it. I don't know. There's certain animals, like I've kept octopus. I used to pet my pet octopus on the head after I got home out of school, and I just couldn't eat octopus at this point after keeping one and feeling its energy. They were so sentient, like it was so aware.
They're one of the smartest animals in the universe. And, they can change colors and do all kinds of other things too, but they have a very, very high intelligence. By the way, a friend of mine now goes by the name of King Kahani, Robert Ernst up in Seattle. He knows how to survive off of the land. So what does he do to get snails? He just goes out in his garden, picks them up, and cooks them, and eats them. He has talked about Anthropomaximology. He's one of these Renaissance guys. He's managed coffee plantations. He's managed vineyards, all kinds of things. He's an agricultural engineer, and he's can't use any of his licensing here in this country. So he's up in Bellingham doing just gardening and things like that. But he can survive anywhere. We could go out in the woods and he could find anything to eat and anything that was poisonous or not poisonous all over the world, because he knows so much about the biology that he can tell right away. And so I ate some pretty weird things hanging around with King Kahani.
That's what I want to get more into. I can only identify a few things like stinging nettle, chaga mushroom, like the really basic stuff, but I definitely want to learn more about that. I wanted to ask you about humidifiers, Adam, because when I moved here, went from like 2,000 to 9,000 feet, and I woke up with bloodshot red eyes and dry throat and dry skin and just super dehydrated every time I'd wake up. So we finally went to Costco and I bought a humidifier, and like the first night sleeping with the humidifier, I felt so much better. And I forget if it was Justin's show, Extreme Health Radio. I think you've been talking about humidity recently, right? And the benefit of that.
Definitely. Humidity, the interesting thing about humidity is they discovered a long time ago that 50% was ideal to prevent you from getting viruses or bacterial infections. 50%. And there was a hospital during the Spanish flu up in Flagstaff. I think only one person died during the flu. And they didn't do the conventional thing. And obviously, there's a partial truth. During the pandemic, they gave huge doses of aspirin and killed many people. You may or may not have heard that recently, and that is partly true. But a lot of the world still died of the virus because they didn't get aspirin in Africa and Ethiopia and some of the other places. But America, we often figure better and quicker ways to kill people. So many times you go to a hospital, it's a death sentence nowadays. Anyway, golly, I forgot the subject. Humidity. Humidity. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm back on track. 50% is ideal because it gives you enough humidity where you're not going to have a nosebleed. And too much humidity can cause a problem too. Excess communities. People who live under excess communities, humidity, have more problems with certain types of disease and others with the other. So it's good for outside alkaline balance and the lungs. We have a protection through the moisture when we breathe in through the nose that's provided through the lungs to do that. But same thing in the desert when I lived in Tucson and in Arizona. I wake up with a nosebleed many times. Denver, I certainly did. First time I ever got a nosebleed, other than because I was in New Jersey and California, no problem there. But when I moved to Denver, that's when I started getting nosebleeds.
Yeah,
Humidifiers,
it definitely stopped my nosebleeds. Yeah, and yeah, you had me on this rabbit hole about humidity. I found this cool study from 1986, and it basically said that viruses composed of nucleic acids and proteins prefer high humidity, and lipid-containing viruses prefer low humidity. That really stood out to me. I thought that was interesting.
Interesting, because I read a lot of nursing journals at one time, and they said, is there any truth to that? It was never scientifically done. Well, it was done. They did exact tests at Johns Hopkins, and that information has gone down the rabbit hole. So they knew that at one time, and they could be doing that right now during the emergency going on. I'm not going to go into that because we don't want to get in trouble.
Well, my friend Luke just texted me Alex Jones InfoWars article. I guess the governor of Colorado recently came out and said, if people didn't get the jab yet, then they're not going to get it. And so basically saying, I'm not going to pass any more mask mandates. And so that's good. We recently tried to go Christmas shopping, and my lady won't walk into a store if we need to wear a mask. And I was bummed because I wanted to, buy my mom stuff. And it's like most places here, they require it. And it either says, I'm sure you're familiar with this. It either says you must wear it or it's recommended. And if it says it's recommended, we just walk in without it.
Yeah, California's been really bad about that, definitely.
Yeah. But I wanted to circle back to aspirin because I think when all this started, I believe Ray Peat was talking about aspirin for convid, right? And how it is very effective. And forget where I heard it, but I guess aspirin increases exclusion zone water formation in your body. And that's like one of its foundational effects, how it works.
This is one thing, a major thing I disagree with Ray Peat on. My last aspirin was taken in 1958. And back then, there was a lot more research about how aspirin caused bleeding ulcers. They caused a variety of syndromes, including, Raynaud's syndrome or whatever it's called. Tylenol was even worse for that, by the way. But I just decided, who needs it? I've never heard of anyone with an aspirin deficiency. So I gave it up. And now a lot of people seem to think it really works well for thinning the blood. But look at ginger. Ginger or shiitake mushroom can thin the blood more than anything. In fact, I first read a Harvard newsletter back in the early mid-'80s. And he went to get a blood test, and he thought he had a blood disease. He'd eaten ginger and shiitake at a Chinese restaurant the night before, and it had thinned his blood so much he became fascinated. And he found out that ginger, and turmeric too then, by the way, by extension, because they're very related, and shiitake will thin your blood so much you have to be careful. It does it more than the drug, Wayfarin or whatever they call it, that Coumadin that thins your blood, that you have to be careful with it. So when I eat ginger, I take it sparingly. He also investigated garlic and onion, did a little bit, but not near the drug dose that happened. But those two for sure thin the blood very much. So ginger is a good therapy, but you have to be careful if you're going to eat a whole bunch of it, unless you have a chance of clumping blood. By the way, blood clumps when you're over acid and unclumps too thin when you're over alkaline. The clumping is necessary, but over clumping or over acidity is not recommended any more than under clumping and bleeding is caused by the opposite. So it's kind of a balance between an equal pH for the specific reason. You don't want an alkaline stomach. You don't want an acidic intestine, blah, blah, blah. Each part of your body has a dramatic difference that needs to be considered what its particular acid alkalinity is and that the organ is going to function correctly. So anyone can go and find out the pH preference of the pancreas, the liver, all of these organs, they have acidity. What you put in your mouth, though, overall, by the tongue, will kind of give you a basic idea if everything is lining up, if the choir is all in tune, or the orchestra is all in tune.
Interesting. Yeah, I was just talking to my friend Kylie that was raised vegan from birth, and she was on her deathbed multiple times, just couldn't get out of bed. And now she's eating like beef liver and raw dairy, and she's feeling a lot better. But she felt like she lost her hydrochloric acid, like intuitively, like she felt like food was just sitting there after being vegan for a couple decades. And I forget if, I think we've talked about this in our digestion episode, but what are like your main tips to increase hydrochloric acid? Because I hear it's like animal protein and people have different ideas. Salt or
salt is true. And here's how it works. If you take sodium chloride and put it in your stomach, the sodium and the chloride break up. The chlorine joins with the hydrogen in the water, makes hydrochloric acid. But then what happens to the sodium? It joins with the bicarbonate in your small intestine. This has all been worked out quite extensively about how that works. So the salt provides both the acidity for the stomach and the alkalinity for the duodenum and the rest of the small intestine. So it works out perfectly by just doing salt. Now, other things work because one of the things that sabotages people's digestion is television with commercials. What if you're not eating and you suddenly see that burger? Your stomach starts producing stomach acid into your stomach and you're not prepared to eat anything. But a lot of people then feel compelled to go eat a snack or something. And it's a darn good idea to put something in your mouth if you're going to be watching those commercials, because you can get an ulcer from acids. You know, I've heard these theories. You can get an alkaline ulcer and an acid ulcer. But basically, it's the hydrochloric acid that causes the damage and the messed up pepsin in the actual digestion in the stomach that causes the problem. And it's not H. pylori. That's a bunch of nonsense.
Wow.
Even Skeptic Magazine. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Adam. I was just going to say, is chewing gum kind of the same effect? Because my friend said he got a really upset stomach. I think he was overdoing it, though, doing like 20 pieces of gum a day. But if you have no food coming in and you're just chewing and chewing some gum.
I would be chewing gum after my meals if I could find one with sugar. And they exist, but they're so rare that they cost 20 times as much, because chewing gum is a cerebral pump. So that's why a lot of times in school they won't let you chew gum, because your test scores will improve by chewing the gum. So maybe you can chew on something else, like a piece of celery or something like that. But they'll probably stop that too. But actually, it increases the intelligence of the mind. And if you chew the gum after eating, then it, of course, will help digestion. If you do it before eating, maybe that will help for a little while. But if you do it in between, you can get in some trouble by chewing gum.
Wow. If I came out with gum with sugar, people would probably say you're destroying people's dentition, because they don't understand, like you've talked about in previous shows, sugar doesn't break down the teeth. It's really like uncooked starch that does it, or starch in general.
Yeah, omega-3s actually destroyed my teeth. They're one of the main things. The other thing is doing things halfway. If you have a gold filling and you already have the other fillings, you set up a battery in your mouth. You remember the old experiments when nickels were actually made out of nickels and copper were actually made out of copper? You put them in your mouth after you sanitize them, put them in your mouth, and you can feel an electrical current between that. Well, that electrical current I learned from Dr. Phillips, J.E. Phillips, a dentist, actually breaks your teeth down. He said you even have to be careful if you get no gold filling is complete gold because it'd be too soft. It'd break apart. So they have 15% and 10%. He said a 15% and a 10% can destroy your teeth if you don't match those up carefully. And so I actually regret one of my problems really started. My teeth used to be so good that Dr. Phillips could diagnose me over the telephone by my bite. He said, you had a perfect bite. I sold blotting brushes as blotting brushes. My teeth were my example. And then I believed somebody and put in a gold filling instead of along with the others. And then everything went to heck pretty quickly. So that's one of the reasons. Plus, you will find that omega-3s destroy the teeth indirectly through the glycation process, which people mistake with just sugar. But if you even read longevicist Aubrey de Grey and a lot of other authorities, you'll find out quite clearly that glycation does not just involve sugar. In fact, that's a minor part of the so-called caramelization process in dextrinizations and various things, including activated charcoal.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, I feel like the whole dental topic is just so overlooked in the health community. And if it's talked about, it's so surface level, like avoid sugar, like, I don't know, just eat dairy or something. It's like very basic. I've been looking into like swishing with ozonated water, and there's a lot of cool research showing that can reverse gum disease and periodontitis and all sorts of stuff, just ozone in the mouth.
Some of those things definitely help. One thing that helps is to have some kind of calcium in your mouth after you eat, because that tends to see, the sugar isn't what does it. It's the bacteria that show up. Now, does acidity hurt your teeth? They attract the bacteria. But here's a funny thing. Have a lemon and put all that acidity. It's too acid. It kills the bacteria. So you can actually preserve your teeth more by tapping the lemon up after you eat and killing the bacteria. So, it's kind of a yes, no, maybe universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we started recording, I've made the mistake in the past of only eating breakfast and not eating lunch, and we tend to go long. I remember a few times I was pretty tired. I enjoyed it, but I was tired, and so I ate 5 potatoes with raw butter and white salt before our show, and I'm feeling pretty good. I just got a new convection oven because the house we got here has an electric oven, and for some reason versus gas, it takes forever to heat up. And so I ended up buying another little countertop convection oven, and it cooks the potatoes really thoroughly in just like an hour. And so I'm getting back on the potatoes, but I have trouble not eating them at the start of the day because I don't know what I'd eat if I couldn't have eggs and potatoes from morning to afternoon. I'd probably just drink milk like Ray Pete.
One of the things that fills my stomach when I used to work more physical jobs and sitting at a computer, which you don't need that much protein, avocado. You think that isn't filling in the morning? Have a whole avocado and have olives, and then rice is neutral. So you have rice with pine nuts, and we used to have a mixture of umeboshi plums, things like that, all mixed in. It was delicious. And you put some coconut milk on it, which you have to be careful now. I'm suspicious of coconut milk, and so is Ray Pete. So I probably might not do it except for a treat once in a while. But you can eat a very substantial breakfast out of solar by eating the things that come on trees if you really put some imagination into it. Different diets have said, like the Zone and all those, have said you have to have your protein in the breakfast. And actually, the protein you need in the morning is for your brain. In the midday is for your muscles, and it's for your genitals at night and for your liver. So look at this. The name of the man escapes me now, but he found 3 body types who he called the ectomorph, the mesomorph, and the endomorph. And the ectomorph is a skinny, wiry guy. And that's actually a morning type. And the mesomorph muscle comes through the heart. If you build the heart, you build muscles. So people with what they call heart, and that doesn't mean necessarily circulation, because we have two hearts. We have a pericardium heart in acupuncture, and we have a heart at midday. But the midday one builds the muscle, and the pericardium one at night builds the muscle in the mushroom in our body called the phallus. That's why it doesn't have any bones in it. But a mushroom, I learned from Andrew Weil personally, when I used to hang out with him, that you could put spores of a mushroom under an asphalt driveway, and by morning they would break through. No bone. How the heck does a mushroom do that? And indeed, there was an article after I hung out with him here in Santa Barbara where they said the same thing. They will come right through. Adorno called it frigidity implosion. He said the mushroom and the sex urge works through this process called frigidity implosion. You can find it on the internet. It's where the freezing causes the pier to come right out of the ocean and lifts it out by frigidity implosion. He claims that the secret of the atomic bomb was extreme cold, not extreme hot. So things can get really complicated. Anyway, ectomorph, mesomorph for muscle, and the endomorph for basically the genitals. They tend to put on more weight. A sumo wrestler would be a perfect example of an endomorph. And many people are in between heart and mesomorph. But the three actually follow the three growth periods of the environment: the tree, the vine, and the root. Trees tend to go upward. They're heliocentric. They end up aiming for the sun. A seed will right itself and aim right up to the sky. But when it's looking for water or a root for either water or food, it'll go straight down. That's geocentric. And what about the midday foods? They tend to go in a circle, around and around and around. Even in the iridology, they often have the top of the iris is your tree foods, the bottom is your root foods, and in the middle there tends to be a circular pattern in the middle. Our eyes, really, if you think about it, are a worm cut with slices out of it, and our small intestine is a worm, and our large intestine is a caterpillar, and we grew all these appendages so we could write books and poetry and make science and things like that. But basically, we're here to eat our way to butterflyhood by having this tube down us, which is the center of our entire development and our survival. Life, not just death, begins in the colon, but life begins in the colon too.
Interesting. Do you agree with the statement, muscle is the organ of longevity? There's a popular like keto, paleo girl making the rounds, and she's really anti-sugar and carbs and even caloric restricting. And she's all about, the more muscle you have, the longer you live and the healthier you are. Do you agree with that?
Yes, no, maybe. Ray Peat certainly does, and definitely the amount of muscle mass you can take. There's other things too, but losing muscle mass is a problem with aging. So yes, you want it, but you don't necessarily get it from meat, because you get it from exercise, and then certain things like, we know a potato can make ketones, and you can actually get your protein off of that. There have been not vegan. There have been vegan bodybuilders, but ones that last a long time are usually some form of vegetarian, and they usually are like the Scottish Apollo. He was a vegetarian, and he was the strongest man probably ever in the world. He could lift an elephant. How many people do you know that can squat an elephant? He went up on a giant platform, had ropes tied to the elephant, had a trainer on top of the elephant, and he lifted him up from a squat position. It did basically from the bottom up and lifted it on the train. But at the same time, keto is good for fitness. A lot of athletes, it's more important for them to succeed. Many said, I'll trade 30 years of my life if you'll just let me win these gold medals. And so keto has no problem with that. It's going to even help things on short-term basis. If you really investigate, though, you're not going to find longevity in keto. You're not going to find almost no examples of a keto type diet ever in nature, despite all that stuff about the primitives and stuff. Even you'd be surprised what the Inuit and the Eskimos actually eat besides just a meat diet. And they eat more than probably other areas like in tropical climates. Most of the longevity diets involve potatoes. I think in New Guinea they have 87 different types of potatoes they eat and cook, and all the other kind of the tapioca roots. There's all these kind of roots that we don't get because people don't want to eat them. I've eaten potatoes blancas. Golly, I forget the names of the things I used to get in the Puerto Rican markets when I used to live on Broadway. Actually, in Upper Broadway, I lived in this cheap hotel above all these markets, and I'd go bake everything they had in different potatoes and experiment with them. And potatoes have and the root vegetables have a lot of longevity because where do the minerals go? They sink to the bottom. The earth elements tend to go into the minerals in your roots. So if you want minerals, which have a lot to do with living a long life too, and particularly for the lower part of your anatomy, you want less minerals in the head, midway in the heart area, and most of them they gravitate and they sink down by weight. Just like in the periodic table, the gases are in the first row, and you get down to the bottom, it's all the heavy metals and the radioactive ones, uranium, lead, cadmium, all the really heavy ones are down there. Gold.
Interesting. Yeah, this could probably be a whole nother show, but I love your posts on minerals and your take on minerals in general, because I think people go to either extreme. It's like no minerals or, take all the colloidal minerals in the world. And I'm somewhere in between, because minerals can either help or harm you, right? Depending on the forms you take and the supplements you take and the foods you eat. It's kind of a complex world, right? With minerals.
It definitely is. And I'm kind of in between two. We do need a certain amount of minerals. We can be short on them. But in America, it's, because of all the processed foods, you can get that. And now glyphosate, what does glyphosate do? It takes minerals out of food. So you can't get access to a lot of the things that have been glyphosated. White sugar, I have no problem with. They use it instead of fire now in the cane fields. They use that. But since they purified it so much, and I'm not looking for minerals in sugar. Have you seen that, what's his name, Georgie now is recommending a pound of sugar a day for male fertility? Glyphosate takes them out, but I'm not using for it. And because they purify it down so much, I used to drink cobalamin tonic, which was this thing, but lately, for budgetary reasons, I've just been doing sugar and coffee in the morning is all I've been doing. I love the taste of cobalamin tonic, and it does have its benefits, but sugar's working for us now. And I don't eat, Georgie, I was saying, Georgie recommends a pound of sugar a day for male fertility. I buy my sugar in 50-pound bags, but I'm not doing a pound a day. I think we're less than a pound a day, and Vibrant Gal eats about a quarter of that probably.
Yeah, people get so triggered because I'll post on social media sometimes pouring sugar in my coffee or my milk or whatever, and they're like, why not honey or why not maple syrup? And I think people fail to realize the balance, right? Of it's like fuel without nutrients, which isn't evil, right? Just it is what it is.
Well, for a long time I was looking for a substitute for ketchup, and I never could get it right until I realized someone had told me what the secret was a long time ago. Ketchup is more than 25% sugar. So I could never get the taste of any of my sauces right. Finally, I got wise. And now I put sugar in my soup. I put sugar in any seeds that I eat that are low on omega-3s, but I don't care that much about omega-6s. I mix sugar in it, and even a little ketchup. I use mustard and things like that to spice things up a bit. But I use sugar all over the place. And here's my favorite story of sugar. When we were evacuated from here during the fire part of the evacuation, the first one, we were lucky enough to stay at a ranch north of here. It was the anniversary, by the way, of Vibrant Gal escaping Hungary. So I see how traumas tend to repeat in exact days, exact days. Anyway, we're up there, and Vibrant Gal got the flu so badly, I thought she had died in my arms. She was totally helpless, couldn't even move. We fortunately in the kitchen they had office chairs with wheels on the casters on the chair, so I could wheel her into the bathroom and lift her. But one time I picked her up and she just stopped breathing for like 30 seconds. I'm screaming for help. We're out in the middle of the ranch, 35 miles away from civilization. Nobody there. Everybody's gone for Christmas. And I'm screaming. And she comes to and says, "Why are you yelling?" But anyway, I realized that by the sugar, it could keep me going. She needed a straw to eat. And I ransacked the entire house, found one straw. I cleaned it, and we could give her a straw until she could finally get some eggs down and some other things. She could barely eat anything.
Wow.
Well, I was doing okay, but I was worried I would get the flu. I decided I'm drinking 2 quarts of coffee a day and all the sugar. I'm going to cut back. Well, I started getting sick, and a feeling of hopelessness came over me. I thought, we're dead. We're out here. Nobody's here. We can't get any place, and we can't call for help, and we're going to die. And but I said, I'm going to go up and have some more coffee. Within 10 minutes, I took a lot of coffee and a lot of sugar. I'm fine. I never got it. I never got it at all. So I was able to nurse Vibrant Gal back to health. And these days, she takes more sugar too.
Yeah, I've loved your posts about coffee, especially. And I think it was Voltaire, the amount of cups that he drank, and these writers and stuff. And I've definitely pushed the limits of my coffee intake. And I find personally there's a relationship with like how many calories I'm consuming, sugar, and animal protein that definitely, or you could say, I mean, if I eat potatoes, it feels pretty nourishing on the protein front. But I've noticed I can overdo it if I don't eat enough and I drink too much coffee. So I've been experimenting with that for the last year, like eating different amounts of food and different foods and drinking a lot of coffee and seeing how I feel. It's been a fun experiment.
It's good. A lot of times I will, to make sure I'm not addicted, I'll take off for 3 or 4 days from coffee. I haven't done it for a while now, but I used to do it just to see. And I don't get the, what do you call it, the headaches and all the stuff they claim. I miss it. I think, well, I got a lot less energy, so I just go and take a nap. And then when I'm napped, then I go back to my coffee and I'm back to energy. It gives me a lot of energy. And in your body, the wrists are actually endocrine hormonal areas. So I went to the gym one day and I didn't have a coffee in the morning. And I'm there in the morning at large intestine time from 5 to 7 in the morning at Gold's Gym. And I go to do my bench press and I couldn't even lift the thing and my wrists hurt. Well, I went and got a coffee with sugar, came back, and now my wrists were fine and I could lift the weight again, do my bench press. So your hormones have a lot to do with the shape of your wrists, your ankles, your waist, and your neck. So those are things that determine your sexual potency, all bunches of things. And both Adano said coals enter through the back of your neck, and Master Chen said, how do you tell a person that has no spirit? Their neck doesn't touch the collar of their shirt. So it's very important in your neck and your wrists. And it's kind of well known that the wrists are actually erogenous zones, as are the ankles too.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, it's really funny you're talking about the wrist because I've been playing with beaming light into my wrist again. Years ago, I think it was like 5 years ago, Jack Cruz was promoting this QuantLit machine, which was like a light machine that like integrated like cold therapy with fans, but also it could beam in like blue, green, UV, and red light. I think in infrared too, into your wrist. And the marketing thing was that's the arteriovenous anastomosis, which I guess is the direct connection between small arteries and small veins. And so I've been playing around with just like putting an LED, like a red LED on my wrist. And it definitely reduces my stress. It's interesting. People say, well, just go outside, but it's not practical if you have to work on the computer or something like that, or eat indoors, so I'd rather, use lights like that when I can. But it's almost like a little Christmas light. You can just strap that to your wrist.
You can actually put a blue band on your wrist, like one of those tennis bands they use for your, well, anyway, for your wristband. Blue will cool you off, and red will heat you up. And by the way, those anastomoses are very interesting. They're on the fingertips. And people with psychic abilities have as much as natural psychic abilities have as much as 50 anastomoses in one area in the thumb of the fingers. And people that don't have as little as 4 connections there. These are very important points called Jingwell points in Chinese acupuncture, and Akabani points also, I think, in Japanese acupuncture. They're very important. I studied with a Madrid cardiologist who investigated psychic phenomena and the ability to use that. And he found that you could take and do a pattern to activate the anastomoses that could increase your psychic abilities. And it's simply like wet your hands and shake the water off your hands, just like I'm showing you that our audience can't see, but you just, how you have water on your hands and you shake it off. And he said you can increase your psychic ability. So I've used that from time to time as an energy technique. Sanchez Perez was very interesting because he investigated all kinds of people who had psychic abilities. There were a lot. You've heard of the guy that could take pictures with no film in it and things like that. I've met another person that could do that once upon a time. Again, Anthropomaximology, we have abilities that we don't know about. For instance, even though John of God turned out to be a fraud, I actually warned my friends about him from the get-go, that he was a scam artist. But Arrigo, have you ever heard of Arrigo? Mm-mm. Arrigo is so amazing. One of the people I was acquainted with was Henry Belk. He was the owner of Belk department stores. I don't know if there still exists on the East Coast, mostly, I believe. But anyway, he went with Dr. Puharich down into Brazil to investigate this guy. He was called the surgeon of the rusty knife. He would take a person and just take a rusty knife and cut the cataracts out with no anesthesia, and no one ever felt any pain. And he did it to thousands of people. He healed the president of Brazil's son, who was a fan of him. He healed the main rock and roll singer, whatever their music type was in Brazil, their main soccer star, or whoever he was, all kinds of people, thousands of people he worked on for free because he said, it's not me, it's my gift. Well, they put him in jail because he broke the Catholic laws of not being Jesus and healing. So they put him in prison, but the prison guards respected him so much, they just left the cell open and had the people in the prison all the time. So he was finally granted a pardon by the president of Brazil when he found out what had happened. He predicted his early death, which happened shortly after that, but he healed many times he just used that rusty knife. And Henry Belk and Puharich did experiments. You can't even touch the eye without screaming in pain when you touch it. I used to work for a company that made tonometers, and I used to hate to have even that thing touch my eye. It's the reflex to close it. They had a hard time doing the tonometer test on me because I keep on wincing. Well, imagine sticking a rusty, no sanitation or anything, just sticking it in the eye, cutting it out. Never had anyone die of that, and cut cataracts out and did all kinds of other things, prescriptive medicine, whatever it took. He had all kinds of miracles, brain tumors, everything. And a lot of these people were fake, but Arrigo has never been disproved. And you can still find a couple of videos on YouTube, which I recommend people look at because he was the real deal. And Henry Belk was someone who would go and report to us. I managed a metaphysical bookstore, so he would tell us who was fake. He said Norbu Chen was a fake. He never went to Tibet. I don't know if you heard of Norbu Chen these days. He probably doesn't even get known who he is. and he did this and he did that and so, and he was in prison in Florida and he wasn't into bed, blah, blah, blah. So he'd fill us in on most of the fakes that were around, because when you're in psychic phenomena, you get a lot of fakes. I worked and found a lot of genuine people, but I also found 90% of them were fakes.
It makes sense. Yeah. So that sounds like the positive reflection of like Hannibal, because didn't he like in the movie like eat people's brains alive, like where they couldn't feel it.
Right. With the brain, you actually can't. Once you get, it's an interesting secret of acupuncture. The border is where we have all the pain. Once you get the needle in deep, unless you hit the skin of a capillary or rather a blood vessel or something, you'll feel no pain. Now, I learned from Adonal Lay that the perfect acupuncturist is one who puts the needle in the exact point and it sucks it in. They feel no pain whatsoever. Wow. And the needle doesn't have to be put in. It is sucked in by suction. And the needle is actually an antenna, because I learned from Dr. Goodhart that you can take and put asbestos over the needle or anything to block its transmission, and it won't work. So it's not really a needle. That was a misunderstanding of the Jesuit priests who came to China and said, oh, they put needles in people. And then Chen takes it one further. He said, if you need more than 3 needles to be an acupuncturist, you have to have your license taken away. Because he said, what you can do it in one. Qi works like rivers through your body. And where do you put the dam? Right before the qi. If you put it after, you just stick all the needles you want, and the flood is already down the road, and it doesn't work. So Chen knows a lot of sciences and Tai Chi and Qigong and different things of that nature.
That's cool. Yeah, I think there's more. There was some up in Idaho, but I've still never done acupuncture, and I really want to do it. Ever since I learned about, like, I have Bob Beck's machine, which is hooks to the earlobes with the 111 hertz microcurrent. But the story of that invention from Bob is that acupuncturists were running that through their needles, those harmonics of that frequency, and finding that it stopped addiction, like extreme heroin addiction, cold turkey, in like less than a week for tons of people.
Electroacupuncture, it does work. Yeah. Now they found out in studies, though, guess which works best? You stick a needle and you concentrate on it with your mind. Works better than all the other techniques they have, including electroacupuncture. They have color acupuncture. They have a whole bunch of different acupuncturists. And recently, by the way, something that blew my mind, because I never really believed Adonal in this. He said there's a technique called golden needle technique. You stick it in the lung meridian in the thumb, and it comes out your big toe 50 years later. And I thought, now, wait a minute. Wow. But then in one of I was doing third eye and looking for articles and something, and I found, to my amazement, that many people have swallowed needles and even awls, and have ended up in their feet. Because in one of the answers Ray Peat provided, he said, the cells are just not static. They pass things on. So actually, within a number of years, you can take a needle stuck into your colon and remove it all the way down into your feet. They've taken them out of the thigh. They've taken them out of the chest. They've taken it out of all variety of places. And I have the studies, and I don't know which edition of Third Eye I was in, but that absolutely fascinated me, because it gave some credibility to Adonal's golden needle technique.
That's incredible. One question I had for you, Adam, I can't believe, I guess because I've just gotten into it recently. Since you were a colon hydrotherapist, did you ever do like rectal ozone? I guess it's called like ozone gas insufflations.
Oxygen.
With oxygen. Okay.
We use oxygen, and when I did it, it didn't really work very well, because I could give colonics to myself. I had an electrotox machine, which actually is the kind you lie on the DO, put a towel on. We learned to use brown towels, because no matter what, you couldn't get the stains out of the white towel. So we switched to brown towels. But anyway, I would be on the table. This big tube would go up your butt. It wasn't just a little speculum, 1/2 inch, 3/4, and 1 inch. I usually use a 3/4. You shove it gently up your butt, much like let it suck in like a needle, and then it will go in. And anyway, it would, what would you say? Golly, I already forgot the subject. I got so, and he mounted his horse and rode off in all directions.
I'm the same way. No, oxygen. Yeah, you're talking about oxygen
Yes.
insufflation. Oh, yeah.
So anyway, we did it, and it didn't seem to do anything, and I did it to myself and got no results. Then I went to Adrenals and got a colonic from him one time, and I got a lot of results. Now, what he was doing, I don't know, but he had some kind of secret the way he provided the oxygen, because the oxygen did work. And yeah, they use everything from coffee colonics, which we did, to various kinds. And I've heard of ozones, but I've never experienced one of those myself.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny coming from this perspective of lipofuscin and iron overload, and now getting into like hyperbaric and ozone, which I'm using a lot here at home. And I'm looking into how to fill my own oxygen tanks. And I think you need a prescription generally, but I'm going to try to DIY it. But I think even with 2 oxygen concentrators, you can only get up to like 95% pure oxygen. And that's not good enough. That, 5% could be impure with nitrogen, right? So
yeah, and you want the air works better. Pressurized air is safer, and they actually sell something called carbogen, 2.5%, 5%, and 7%. Miners, I've gone back to old mine manuals from over 100 years ago, and they knew about that. They knew have a certain amount of carbon dioxide, because the oxygen by itself will cause damage. Many people with so-called whatever, I'm not going to mention the name, but they go in the hospital now with it, and the oxygen kills them, or the ventilators kill them, or other things kill them that they shouldn't be doing. If they use carbon dioxide, they get much better result, or a certain amount of carbogen. Hyperbaric chambers could become miracle tools, especially if you could add just 2.5% carbon dioxide to it. Miracle tools, because a buddy of mine was a pioneer. He's the one that restarted the hyperbaric chamber thing, George Wellington Adams. He was a deep sea diver, and he saw the benefits you could get. Like, say you're drunk. He used to be an alcoholic. How did he sober up? Lower me down in my hard hat diving suit to 100 feet. Comes up totally sober within 10 minutes. So he knew all the things it did, and particularly was tied in with the San Antonio Center that did research on that, and then the Navy did it in I forget, in the East Coast. There's a little town there that they have a Navy center that they do it. In San Diego, they send those. So many lives could be saved from carbon monoxide poisoning by having them come out to your home. They have a little coffin like you sit in, but they've underused that. You usually only have those machines in sea areas for nitrogen problems that deep sea divers get when the nitrogen bubble comes out. So you don't find them elsewhere. In San Diego, they're all over the place. There's not a hospital down there that doesn't have them. They'll come out to your house, and even because of all the diving that goes on there. But it works for so many other things. Gangrene. Many people die of gangrene. All I have to do is get in one of those chambers. Gangrene goes away. No steroids, nothing necessary. Just get in, get pressurized, because at 2 atmospheres, the equivalent of being 33 feet under the water, you don't need any hemoglobin to provide all your cells with oxygen. None at all. You're just comfortable down there, and you're more like in a hibernating state, and then all the oxygen is supplied. Because Ray Pete is right. It's the carbon dioxide that promotes the breathing, not the oxygen. When you give oxygen, you repress the breathing. And it's simple physiology.
Yeah, I really miss scuba diving. It's funny. I keep moving to the mountains away from the ocean, and I'd really like to have a spot closer to the ocean, because when I used to scuba dive, I felt like it was doing something beneficial to my brain, even though I wasn't doing, what I'm doing now. Like, wasn't eating sugar and stuff, but I still felt really good after I would dive. So probably part of it.
My friend Greg Whiteley knew Leonard Orr and all those rebirthing crowds, so he decided, let's go scuba diving and rebirth for real. So he took his whole group down and did that, and they basically provided it. So because I know Greg, he took me on many of his scuba diving expeditions, and I never learned to scuba dive. I snorkeled with him. I only went down once where I didn't have a license, so the guy took me down anyway, the dive captain. But anyway, when he was doing that, I became fascinated because I was already into pressurization, how weight has more to do with pressurization than calories and other things. So I read all those PADI manuals. I went to the university and just checked out about 8 of them and studied them and was amazed at how many of our diseases are pressurization diseases, even prior to the acidity and alkalinity. That's why Qi is pressurization. Below that is a magnetic field, then the electrical field, and then the precipitated field. But you always see people saying Qi is electrical. Not true. It's the steam over the rice, which means the pressurization, and that's why you can actually move objects at a distance by the pressurization field. Much of ESP moves in the same way as electricity. You push here, and it goes there, and the other person pushes back. And a lot of so-called primitive people, they talk to each other at a distance. They don't need a cell phone. Rupert Sheldrake has done a lot of good research on that, and I've seen examples of it many times where my teacher at Donald Lake can talk to me with by sending me messages in the mind.
So that's one of the coolest things to me about being in a committed relationship, especially like with a woman, because you can build that instead of just, like a lot of men do, just go around and constantly, and you can't build something deep with something like that deep connection of telepathy. Some people call it telepathy. And have you seen the movie? Since you're a movie buff, Adam, we've been watching a lot of movies. Like last night, we watched a Shoot 'em Up, like a Jason Statham new movie, a lot of violence. But we watched one recently called Dreamcatcher. Have you ever heard of that one?
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
I think you would like it. Yeah, I think it was like early 2000s, but there's more Morgan Freeman, and then basically it's like a parasitic ET invasion, kind of like Alien, but a little more modern. And yeah, it's kind of cool, but there's telepathy involved. So it's these group of guys that get this telepathic ability. I don't want to give too much away, but I recommend it.
Yeah. Interesting. It definitely exists. I've been around people who have high degrees of it. Greg Whiteley has a certain amount of it. Chen definitely. He can read your mind, so you just get used to it. If you don't want to be around them, the same with the Donald Lay. They could read your mind. Now Adano said it's a spiritual crime to go invading someone's mind, but I gave him permission. So then he would signal me in peculiar ways. Like one time, he was coming to visit me, and I wanted him to kind of have a psychic connection because it was really cool. So his way of messaging me was to make it rain. So at exactly 3 a.m, which was his specific love time, rain hit my roof. I jumped up and held the phone in my hand. It rang right away. It said, "Hello, Adamo." He said, "Yep, I need directions in to get to your place." So I went and picked him up and came in. Next week, same thing. And he came every 3 months. 3 a.m, next time, rain hits the roof, jump up, pick the phone up. It rings. I say, "Here I am." And so the third time, it happened again. And this time, a friend of Adano's was with him and said, "Are you doing something to make him come faster?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess I am." He said, "I don't think that's a good idea," because he was obsessed with driving 60 miles an hour because of some connection with the delta brainwave or something. And he drove like a bat out of hell. So anyway, I stopped doing it. And then the next time, none of that happened. Then 3 months later, my mother had cancer. So I got a signal. It's hard to explain how this happens, but that he was going to come a day early than he promised. And I told my mother he's coming a day early, and he'll bring the rain. And she said, "Oh, come on, that's not going to happen." Well, I was gone on that Friday, the day earlier, and suddenly a cloudburst hit the mobile home, and there's a knock at the door, and there's Adamo looking for me. He's not here, so he went elsewhere to my friend Melissa Wolf and stayed with her. But anyway, there he was a day early. So anyway, the powers of our mind are mind-boggling, And one thing I learned from O'Donnell and from Chen, instead of developing the psychic abilities, develop the meditative abilities to control them. Because otherwise you might be doing voodoo on a driver. Someone cut you off on the freeway and you say, you blah, 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 and things come true. So you want to learn how to meditate first, go to the top of the mountain, and then all the other gold mines on the mountain are yours, rather than try to get psychic ability, which is mostly a kundalini. But you have a cosmodyne effect or an environmental effect where you can pick up everything from the environment. We're connected. We think we're totally separate organisms. Imagine a red blood cell. I'm a totally different person here. I've got nothing to do with the rest of the body. Then why are you directed to go here and there, and they depend on the demand of whatever? You get the idea.
Yeah. We just rewatched the new the last good Star Wars movie before it was bought by Disney. The one with I forget the one where Darth Vader becomes Darth Vader, like that last good one. And it reminds me of that, because if someone doesn't have control over, say, their sexuality or their anger, it reminds me of that Star Wars story, right? Like it could be used for harm.
And it is. Actually, voodoo does exist, and healing at a distance exists, but one has to be careful with that. In fact, kinesiology can be done at a distance. When I first got into the fact that you could lower your hand or arm up and you could position it in a certain way, I worked on a friend of mine 2,000 miles away. He was in Sepulveda, California, has a new name nowadays, and I was in Houston. So as an experiment to see if Adana was exaggerating or not, I said, can we do an experiment? So his two sister-in-laws were there, and he was there. And he's a very strong guy. He was a gymnast, could do iron crosses, handstands on the rings, all that. So he puts his arm out, and I said, test him how strong he is. Oh, he's really strong. So then I did a technique that the police force actually uses, but they don't know it works at a distance, just simply going down the central meridian. And then I said, try it now. Now, he didn't know what I was doing. And she said, oh, my God, his arm went right down, and he was shocked. And then I said, okay, try it again. He's stronger now than he ever was by going up that meridian. So these things can be done. When I told Adano about it, he said, I could be a circus performer if I wanted to, but the intimacy of touch is more important. So he recommended that I not do that on an ongoing basis, and there could be repercussions. Same with radionic machines and all those kind of dowsing things. When you work at a distance, you better know what you're doing and what is involved in sticking your business and other people's business, in other words.
Well, we're talking about spooky stuff. It's been like maybe 6 years since this has happened to me. The last time it happened, I was like demoing at a Costco for a drink, coconut water. But it happened a couple nights ago. I was at dinner with friends and my lady, and I don't know if this has happened to you, but like this guy was just staring at me, and then it looked like his mother, that her back was to me sitting at the table. She did a full turnaround and stared directly at me. And then I heard him say, don't look at him. And I was like, whoa, like I got more of a dark vibe from that. I wasn't wearing a weird hat or a bright shirt. I didn't stand out. I was just a normal guy. And so something drew them to look at me. And I don't know if they knew me from social media, but it didn't really feel like that. I don't know. Have you had experiences like that?
Yeah, it happens at the what do they call it? The Mal-Ojai, or no, that's the wrong word. It means the evil eye in Mexico. The curanderas and curanderismo deals with that. It's a very real thing, and Rupert Sheldrake has done numerous experiments of people watching people, and even over cameras in a room 1,000 miles away. And they start looking around like feeling that someone's looking at them. So it can be done. I've had some success, some not success. But the other thing Sheldrake has done is that animals have a degree of knowing where you're at any time. And he's done a lot of research. When I stayed with my friend who's a psychologist in La Jolla, she had these 2 puppy dogs. And I noticed about 3 or 4 minutes before she drove up, they would run to the door and be barking at the garage. And finally, I wondered about that. So as soon as I heard him bark, I went and looked out the window. And she had to be about 5 blocks away in a kind of, you had to come down this street, then make a turn here, then make another turn there. Now, how either they had super hearing, which is possible, but Rupert Sheldrake said actually it can happen. A dog or a cat will know when its owner is in trouble or is coming home an hour before, even in his research. And he said people will doubt that, but he has research. He wrote a whole book about it, I believe, about that connection with the animal world. We have that too, but our intellect gets in the way. When you're a child, you tend to have these experiments, and then someone says, "You can't do that. That's not science." And so you stop doing it and say, "Okay, I guess I can't do it." So we have a cultural matrix or programming that makes us stop doing the things that you hear about when you're a child. And I remember having really unusual experiences as a child. Then they kept telling me science, 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 science. And here I am kind of in between. But fortunately, I had these kind of teachers that showed me, science doesn't know quite as much as they think they know.
Yeah, I found the book, Adam. It's called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home by Rupert Sheldrake.
Right. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, Sheldrake's an impressive researcher.
Yeah, didn't he get banned from TED Talks? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he did. Of course, they upped his. And back in that day, at least they didn't take him off the internet, so they increased his popularity quite a bit by doing that. Getting banned used to be an advantage. Now they put you in the way away.
They did that to Thomas Cowan recently. I think they took his Convid book off Amazon like earlier this year or something.
Oh, there are certain people for certain things you just can't say. And it really, I personally think there's people in Google who are on our side, because I see some of the most reasonable stuff getting through and sometimes the other stuff not getting through. So by all intents and purposes in language, I see people that are still out there. So I think there are some people in Google, just like any organization, not going along with the program. So, and they're doing their own. When I worked in the South at the TV station, it was a time when all that racism was going on in the, when was that? The 70s. So I worked for this TV station, and I could edit what slides and what PSAs, what public service announcements. I did all the black college ones, minders and just all that kind of stuff, and all the hippie oriented stuff kept going up there. No one ever said anything. So I was basically controlling the content. I could put in whatever PSA I wanted in the commercial. So I did. Ran whatever I wanted to. And even the slides, I would put up the slides at the station and things back then. Low tech back then,
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Adam, do you want to jump into some questions near the end here? We have quite a few.
Sure. Let's do it.
Let's see. I'll try to read some that we haven't done before. This is a fun one. Thoughts on light language? Is that like speaking in tongues?
It's a very real thing. I've actually met people who can do it. I used to know some of the explanations of that, but our brains, under hypnotism and mesmerism, can actually do that. Louis L'Amour, the so-called Western author, he was actually regarded himself as a frontier, including space author. But Louis L'Amour reported the case of a woman that, under hypnosis, came up with a fantasy language. It didn't exist anywhere, and a planet and everything, and a complete history of it. Nothing ever really existed like that, but she knew the language and she knew all the transitive verbs and all that kind of stuff and how it worked, and spoke it perfectly. So again, the human mind can do that. And I've actually met a couple of people who could speak in tongues.
Wow. Yeah, I took a Christian studies class at USD in California. And I remember I had to go to different denominational churches. And I think I went to a Protestant one, and they were all into that. And I was kind of weirded out at the time. I was like, this is strange.
Well, I did a lot of solar workshops in Texas, and that's where you're going to find a lot of speaking in tongues. If I mentioned the word reincarnation, I was in big trouble in Texas at the time. I don't know what it's like now, but back then.
How can one cleanse the colon naturally without invasive methods like colonics?
Eating on thyme, tree, vine, root, and drinking coffee. Also, you can do little tricks like go into a bathtub with hot water and then put the cold water in where your butt is warmer. It'll make you pass gas. Also, there's points called large intestine 4, which is both a reflex point and an acupuncture point right between the webbing of the thumb and the large intestine. Work the left if you wanted to go faster. Work the right if you want to slow down diarrhea, actually will work. And let's see, what else? 3 meals a day. Coffee definitely works wonders when you have no other option or don't know how to eat foods on time. Then coffee definitely works. And sugar. Sugar helps too. And avoid certain foods. Cheese is fine. The melted cheese on a pizza gets people in trouble. It tends to coagulate. And don't eat Velveeta because it's totally indigestible like chewing gum in the first place. And certain other processed cheese are. Don't eat popcorn because it actually can cause problems. I know a man who exploded from eating popcorn and beer because of the two. It was my co-author's uncle. Since it's a personal story, I'm not going to. Sometime I'll tell you not on the air about what happened, but it's an amazing story. And then in Cottage Hospital here in Santa Barbara, when Cottage Hospital used to be a different type of place and a different time, a doctor put on the death certificate, "Death by popcorn." They made him take it out, but he said, "Yeah, he was all clogged up with popcorn, and it killed him."
Do you think puffed lily seeds are the same thing? Because I recently bought some of those. It's kind of different from popcorn. Have you heard of that? Like puffed lily?
If they expand, they can be in trouble. One of the worst things for people messing people's bowels up is psyllium. As a colonic therapist, you see a lot of colonic therapists are recommending psyllium. I studied with Dr. Merrill Roy, who was a premier colonic therapist in Mesa, Arizona. And he warned, do not use psyllium. It's the worst thing. If you've ever, I worked on some people, colonics, that had taken it. Oh my God, it's like a jelly mass. Now, if you have a museum colon, up here, transverse across here, then down on the other side, and with the little, like the thing in the toilet, the little sigmoid colon, fine. But when I did x-rays of people's colon, I only found one colon like that. Everybody else was like this with megacolons, strictured colons, tangled all up and stuff like that. That kind of colon is a lie. So what you want to do is keep it flowing. If you start having cramps and things like that, go on a liquid diet for 3 days, because when people fast, and they put chunk food in, sometimes it tangles up and then you're stuck with it for months. But if anytime a person has a colonic, they should eat liquid food for 3 days after to fill up the sausage so it's incorrect. Then all your chunks aren't going to cause a problem. And in solar nutrition, we would take all the nuts and the morning fruit and things like that, blend it in a blender or a juicer, and then just drink it. And then a blender for the cooked vegetables in the middle of the day, and then the root vegetables and potato blend at night, and add some sugar or salt and eat it. And that's fine. So anyway, if a person's having that kind of problems, because healthfully, gorillas they eat 45 pounds of food a day, and they go to the bathroom with big bowel movements. Some say as much as 2 hours at a time, every 2 hours. Some say several times, but let's say they go more than us. Lions under meat. Now, this is a wild animal, a carnivore. They're not supposed to go to the bathroom as much. In zoos, they gave them nothing but meat, 4 bowel movements a day. But here doctors say, a bowel movement every 2 or 3 days, you're okay. You're not. It causes problems. many of the what are called skatols and indoles are circulated over and over through the body and retoxify you. The indole-free and skatol diets and cadaverine, sounds really neat, doesn't it? Some of that cadaverine. Tryptophan causes cancer when it keeps in the colon over a certain amount of time. Now, you can either go on a low tryptophan diet and prevent it from forming, or you just shovel it out every, have 3 or 4 bowel movements a day. I usually have 3 to 6 bowel movements a day. When I eat dairy, it slows it down, so I control the amount of dairy I have so I don't get what they call milk pebbles. 3 times in my life I've had to dig those things out with my fingers, and it's not a pleasant experience. So you can get too much milk, and at the wrong time particularly. Midday is the best time for your dairy products. Cream is neutral. Have it any time of day. Mix it in food. Butter is neutral. Ghee is neutral. And all dairy products are partially neutral. You're not, if you're going to put some milk in your mashed potatoes, you're not going to be in any kind of a problem for nutrition.
Wow. And with melted cheese, I think that's blown people's minds in previous chats that we've had. Did you say the cure for that is like vinegar, like raw apple cider vinegar? Like that'll melt the
apple cider vinegar you can, and eating grapes, grape vinegar, and even grape wine, red grape wine, gradually, small amount at lunchtime, and the apple cider vinegar either midday or nighttime, a little bit, always dilute it with honey and a certain amount of water, because it's very strong on the stomach. When people tell you, oh, I take 2 tablespoons of that, the stomach says, oh my God, what are you doing? But in 1970, I was diagnosed as having incurable arthritic gout. So the doctor put me on medication for it. I happened to be reading an astrology book, and it said people between this decan, which was the middle of February, I forget, from the 1st to the 9th, which I fit in, they will have calcification problems. I said, wow. It says, take calcium. So I went and took it. Didn't do anything. Then I found an ARE journal, Association of Research and Enlightenment, Edgar Cayce, who I was very familiar with. It had an article about how apple cider vinegar with calcium supplement at meals would solve the problem. So I instinctively did something that Donald told me to do later. I skipped breakfast. It just didn't seem right. I had the apple cider vinegar and the calcium supplement with my meal at lunch and at dinner. 3 days later, I had no more arthritic pains and the whole arthritic gout. I was diagnosed for life. The doctor said, you will have this for life. Get used to it. I went back in and said, can I throw this medicine away now? He was mad at me. So that was the end of it. And I stopped taking it. I figured the apple cider vinegar worked. Why would I keep taking it? It's a medicine, so I don't take it on a regular basis. But if I have certain problems like that, then I recommend it, because I was diagnosed to have incurable arthritic gout for the rest of my life. I don't have it. And that was in 1970 in Redding, California.
Wow. Yeah, apple trees do really well in North Idaho. Our first home up there had one, and as far as like prepping goes, that's one of my top things. Like I think about, like, if you want to clean your water distiller, you can make your own apple cider vinegar if you have apple tree, right? It's a pretty good thing to have.
My friend Greg up there in Idaho, he has a lot of apple trees too. He's become a farmer up there and does really well. He grows enough food for all year up there.
That's amazing. Wow. This is a question from our friend Justin Stellman. Do you think ancient people in the Bible lived longer because of low iron and PUFA levels?
You know, I think they lived longer, and I think it more had to do with pressurization and things like that. And on the PUFA, I would be speculating, but I think there actually were longer living people. Even Ray Peat has talked about how that's a guy in Florida was 150, and And basically, he couldn't get regular food, but he lived in a citrus orchard, so he ate a whole bunch of things. Definitely, iron is an aging element and causes problems, and definitely pupa do. But something I think in the atmospheric pressure made a difference back then too, because living under certain pressurizations can extend and shorten lifespan. Repeat and go up in the mountains and things like that. And supposedly, back in the day, you could, when the seas were lower, as the story goes, wine would not, it would not form an alcoholic beverage because the pressure was too much on it, as the story goes. I have to ask a vintner if this is really true. But anyway, it has a lot to do, I think it had to do more with pressure, and that there were people who knew techniques of longevity that we don't know today. True longevity is probably based on what's called the seven sins of aging by Aubrey de Grey. Unfortunately, de Grey has his head up his butt when it comes to the cure of those, because he wants to use modern medicine to do it. But basically, he has 7 devils. That's lipofuscin inside the cell and the mitochondria, outside the cell, and then it's too many cells, cancer, too little cells, your muscle breaks down, glycation, which has more to do with pupas than anything else. And what are the other two? Genetics actually plays 1/7 of the part in the cell and 1/7 in the mitochondria. That's the 7 deadly sins. So really, you have to take all those. I happen to specialize on omega-3s because they worked for me in my particular thing that I was doing wrong, and I got well doing it. And I don't have, I couldn't write a single book on omega-6s. Ray Peat says they're bad, so I tend to minimize them. I don't avoid anything at all. The walnut has certain benefits. I eat it in the morning, even with omega-3s, but I only have 1 walnut or even a half a walnut in the morning. That's all. And I eat it on time for the brain, for the manganese and everything. But I certainly wouldn't take walnut oil under any circumstances, like a lot of these people are doing. And so anyway, there are 7 different stages, and I'm sure there's probably some other factors. One of them, according to Donald Lay, is your attitude. If everybody in the world tells you you're going to die at a certain age, people follow suit and they die. Okay, I guess you're not supposed to live over 80. I guess it's time for me to leave. And they go. I think there's a lot to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely agree. This is a good one from my friend Joe. Why do we need to be more sympathetic than parasympathetic?
Sympathetic tone. The reason I can talk to you right now is my sympathetic tone. If I tried to meditate without it and went parasympathetic, I'd fall right over and fall on the floor. So rest and digest, but it's not fight or flight. It's live, because you need the sympathetic for that. Now, we need both. Obviously, you're not going to involve your sympathetic system if you do need to take a nap or you do need to recuperate. But living itself and true meditation is stand on your own 2 feet. You can't do it without the sympathetic nervous system. And back in the day, they knew that. They called it the ortho-parasympathetic nervous system. Ortho meaning right, and the other, the para, beyond, which means it's indirectly involved in your health. So one is being anabolic and the other is being catabolic. Actually, they work both ways, because obviously you get some building under the parasympathetic nervous system. But where do you get the building in the first place? By moving around, by lifting weights. Without that, you can do all the resting you want, and you're not going to have anything but a big bag of Jell-O on the couch. Couch potato or couch Jell-O.
So you have to eat potatoes and move.
That's right. You better move when you eat those potatoes.
What's the difference between sleeping on an empty stomach versus sleeping with a full stomach? Because the main alternative health message is don't eat before you go to bed, right?
They tell you that. Some say once the sun goes down, don't touch any food. but actually it makes you susceptible to serotonin, cortisol, all of those functions escalate. Now, it's probably a good idea after 9 o'clock at night to eat lightly. But that doesn't include sugar. It doesn't include sometimes I take a little cream and a little sugar and mix it together, take a couple teaspoons. That's all it is. A friend of mine from grammar school took my advice recently, and what he doesn't do extremes of sugar, but if he gets up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, he takes a cube of sugar. And that would prevent a lot of heart attacks. One time with my first wife, we went to visit her grandmother at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we went and woke her. She sat up in the bed and dropped over dead, because that's a perfect example of how if she had taken some sugar before that, it probably wouldn't have happened. So sugar, as Ray Peat goes into adequate research about how a little sugar, when you wake up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, actually helps. I've been trying to get up to stay up all the time. I'm not doing very well at it, but so I don't mind getting up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or anything. But I always take at least a teaspoon of sugar, and sometimes I take a couple of ounces of coffee, and sometimes half and half sugar, and just take a little of it, and then I go back to sleep. It's not tough on the stomach because the stomach doesn't digest sugar. It doesn't digest coffee. It's using the other organs in the body. So my stomach's not going to be compromised by it, and I'm not going to feel bloated. And so I go to sleep like a baby with the a little. What did they say? A little sugar makes the medicine go down.
I love it. So this is a funny question. Which Rife machine does he like the best? Because I think I saw one of your posts where you were saying, I think you said Adano put Royal Rife in his place. So I'm going to switch this question to what are your thoughts on Rife machines? I know Morley said our liver's the Rife machine, but
in reading the scientific literature out of places even like Popular Science and Popular Mechanics, you used to be able to go into libraries any time of the day or night. Now you notice how more school, less libraries. Right here in Montecito, you can't go to Saturday anymore. If you work 5 days a week and a Monday to Friday job, forget it. You don't go to the library. You can't research like I did. I've been in libraries where I was there from 7 a.m. when they opened the door till 2 o'clock at night when they kicked me out. They came and asked me to leave. So libraries are very important for finding research like that. Got the question again.
Royal, it's about Rife, because Royal Rife, he was down in Southern California, right? I think he died down there.
Okay. Yeah. Rife was well documented in much of the magazines. His machine was a lot different. If you read Popular Science and the journals, it was a lot different, used green light, all kinds of different things, was not what they're selling. Now, the Rife machine is basically a glorified TENS unit. The microscope doesn't seem to exist anymore. And pleomorphism, I think there's some credit for it. I'm suspicious about a lot of the people who glibly talk about it as being part of the terrain theory and all of that thing. So I'm very suspicious of a lot of that. I view as that there are infectious diseases, but our terrain, obviously, you can have a really serious bug and have no problem. But there have been yogis, you give them poison, doesn't bother them at all. You give them anthrax, doesn't bother them at all. Actually, onions can help prevent anthrax. So there's all kinds. The U.S. Army used to spray buildings with onion juice to kill anthrax. Suddenly, when the crisis occurred during 9/11, anthrax, there's no cure. We have no cure for it. You're in danger. How come you could read any of the science magazines back then, and even Time magazine, where they used sprayed all the buildings with the U.S. Army? What happened to the memory? That went down the memory hole awfully quickly, didn't it?
Have you heard of what was his name? Anton Priori, like plasma gases? Because that was kind of, I think it was around the same time, right, as Rife, but it was kind of a different thing, like the Tesla violet ray. I think Edgar Cayce talked about that.
That has some value. Donald used to use that all the time. And a friend of mine named Thaddeus Hedges he bought one of those machines when Donald actually taught at the Edgar Cayce Center back there and knew Hugh Lynn Cayce, the son. And I was always fascinated with Cayce. I was an expert on Cayce before Jess Stern ever wrote his book. I read There Is a River, Gina Sormanara's books, Joseph Millard's Edgar Cayce, Mystery Man of Miracles. I was stoked on Edgar Cayce. I knew every detail about his life at the time. And one time when there was a famous psychic, George something, who talked to Bishop Pike's son, a lady gets in the cab at the airport when I was a cab driver and said, every time I get in a cab in Santa Barbara, the cab driver is familiar with Edgar Cayce. I said, guess what? You did it again. So I met this George so-and-so when she comes to talk to her dead husband every once in a while. I don't know how that works. I think a lot of it is baloney, but I think some people actually have abilities to do things like that. Most of the ones that advertise they can do it don't, though. But there are some legitimate people. Bishop Pike was very impressed with George, forgot his name, who used to live here in Montecito.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are obsessed now with like Rudolf Steiner, and I get like a darker vibe from Rudolf Steiner versus Edgar Cayce. Like I'm more drawn to Cayce. I don't know what it is. But.
I did too. And Rudolf Steiner, I've tried to read his stuff. I can read Blavatsky. I can read even Alice Bailey. I can read some of those, and I get certain insights on them. I don't believe it all. But Rudolf Steiner, he'll say something really intelligent, and suddenly, what the heck? What is he talking about? There's some of the most ridiculous things in his books. And of course, part of that is because he wrote back in 1900 and time like that. But one of the things that people give him credit for is the heart is not a pump. He doesn't know how it works. Dr. Rodeman of Appleton, Wisconsin. He's the guy who knew exactly how it worked. And I actually wrote a book called The Heart is Not a Pump, about mostly based on Rodeman's research. When I first found it in the medical library in Fort Worth, California, I was so amazed. I didn't have a way to type on the computer at that time. I wrote it out by hand, the entire article out of the journal I found it in. And Rodeman, now you can find some of his books on there, and I covered him extensively in my book, The Heart is Not a Pump. And there's actually a medical textbook that's really good that no one tends to mention because they want to give certain other people credit for the concept. But this other textbook actually goes into examples of how it works. There's no real blood circulation in the fetus, et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't work by the heart having gold in it and structured water and all that. That's a bunch of nonsense. I learned from O'Donnell, you know how it works? When a plumber comes to your house, where do they go first? The ceiling. Why do they go to the ceiling? They check that little vent, because without that, just like I have a Coke can in my hand. I poke one hole, it pours really slow. I poke the other, it pours out really well. Same thing with flushing your toilet. Without the air pressure on the other end, you're not going to flush very well. All your stuff's going to get backed up continuously. So the first place that a plumber goes is up on the roof and checks that. Then he goes and replaces the pipes or whatever else is going on. I think they have filters up there too they check as well. Not being a plumber, I can't attest to that. But anyway, the gas pressure or the pericardian meridian, the Chinese had the heart as an organ, and the circulation, not heart, circulation sex pericardium at 7 to 9. They obviously understood the difference, that the arteries are ruled by the heart, but the anastomoses and the veins are ruled by the pericardium circulation sex meridian. They knew the difference in ancient times, and it's been totally forgotten now, except for Dr. Rodeman. And I found Civil War doctors that knew the principle too, that knew that the heart can't possibly do all that pumping through miles and miles and miles of capillaries. No way.
Wow, interesting. Someone asked the cause of sinusitis and stuffy nose. Is that another pressure thing? Do you like I just got a neti pot, which I haven't used for years, and I've been enjoying that.
That helps. Often, what I used to tell people with sinus is shine a flashlight and see if they're really blocked up. You can see. Same with breast cancer. You instead of going to a doctor, take a very strong flashlight, and if a woman has enough breath, shine it through. If they see a bump that's clear, they don't have cancer. If it's a lump that you can't shine it through, you may have cancer, but then you better go get professional help and see someone who really knows what they're doing. Well, with sinuses, it's caused by what Ray Peat might call metabolic overrule. He has a better word than I'm making. But in other words, the metabolism can cure a lot of things down the pike. And involved with sinus usually are stomach on a toxic level and spleen pancreas meridian on an allergic level. So usually what it says, since the spleen pancreas handles lymphatics, and that has a lot to do with lymphatics, then it would say that the spleen pancreas isn't doing well. How do you fix that? Sugar. The pancreas needs sugar. In fact, people who have pancreatitis that they go to the hospital and often die for, a heaping tablespoon of white sugar will stop a pancreatic attack in its tracks immediately.
Wow.
And stomach is the toxic reaction. So something is being put into the stomach that the stomach doesn't like. And then it causes a sinus override from it. And of course, certain things, there are allergies. Some people don't handle dairy very well. I'm sorry, it might be the perfect food, but even Ray Peat admits that some people have dairy allergies. There are ways to work with that. I know people who just confine their dairy products to the midday, and they get over it eventually. So there are various points to look at that. But I'd look at the spleen pancreas meridian, and the time to do that is orange time, 9 to 11 in the morning. Good time to work on any of that type of issue. And then stomach time, what you put in your mouth for breakfast from 7 to 9 in the morning, is very important too. Those meridians are right next to each other. One is the toxic reaction and one is the resulting antibiotic reaction afterwards. The difference is like if you take a disease, a mouse, tetanus kills a mouse because it's a toxin within an hour. Human beings, it's not a toxin, but our antibodies come back and kill you a week later. And we have an immunity that we can build up by following 7-day rhythms. It's called circaseptan rhythms. And it's a very real deal that people have forgotten. You see me wearing orange today because it's Orange Day. This is just one more woo-woo way of dealing with the circaseptan rhythms. I time it by wearing red on Mondays, orange on Tuesday, yellow on Wednesday, green on Thursday, blue on Friday, indigo, violet, and black on Saturday, and white on Sunday. By doing that, I tend to time my rhythms. There's other ways to do it too. You can get certain habits to do it. But the 7-day rhythm is not as powerful as the 24-hour rhythm, but there are lunar rhythms, tidal rhythms, infra rhythms, ultra rhythms, all these other rhythms that we can pay attention to and time our body more. No one would go to a mechanic and say, save me some money, don't time the car. They'd think you were crazy. And you'd have some problems. You'd have a carbon buildup and all kinds of things. So timing is everything in many ways. You are when you eat as well as you are what you eat.
Do you have any question for me? Any recommendations for women that are susceptible to the lunar cycle? Because it seems like women are more affected by like a full moon than men, from my observations. Maybe I'm wrong, but are there mitigations to that? Like, and I've heard it depends on the parasite load in the body and stuff.
Estrogen level. Estrogen is not even a female hormone, and I didn't know that till I I started listening to Ray Peat. And now I've looked at the research. He's right. It's a stress chemical. Now, for pregnancy, you need it. You need it for certain times. So a woman has it for pregnancy. But the whole idea, if estrogen is so important to keep bone, and men don't have it, why don't they have all that bone disease afterwards? Why do the women have it? They give them estrogen, make it worse. Estrogen is basically found in soot. Have you heard Ray P talk about this to an extent? It's in soot. So they had a perfect deal. They don't have to go to a lab, invent this, invent that. They take the various portions out of soot and say, I've got this product, you got that product, we sell it as this is this, this is this. It's all a big scam. In fact, much bigger than the omega-3 scam even. We've got the nitric oxide scam, the serotonin scam, all kinds of scams out there. But estrogen is probably the one that has killed more people, and that many doctors are not responsible. They think they're doing the right thing, but somebody knows, Big Pharma knows, you can bet, because the whole scam had to be set up someplace. And Ray Peat can go into much more detail than I have in the history, but I've listened to everything he said about it and researched it extensively myself. And he's correct. It's a scam. And it can cause all those mood problems and stress problems that women are always susceptible to. By the way, a woman is more solar. They represent the sun. In our society, we reversed it. But the man is the one that's more subject to those kind of
lunar
episodes later in life. Jung wrote about the anima and the animus. Everyone who is a male has like an animus, and their anima makes them attracted to certain people in their life. Well, as they progress, they become the other. So that's why a man, when they're in their 20s and 30s, they usually handle the checking account, all of that. What happens when they get 60, 70, or 80? The woman handles the accounting because they're not doing a very good job. And I've seen guys, they throw the hissy fits and go crazy and run down the street like crazy people. I've seen many examples of it. And a woman can have that calculating animus like a lawyer and be so strong that it scares the heck out of the guy, and he has nothing to do but put his fist through the door or something like that, or kick in the door or whatever. So at first, yes, women are more moody in their 20s and 30s, and then you have this change. Ribisi clearly showed that we're more anabolic at birth and through the first 10 or 20 years. And then we become catabolic at middle age. That's why so many heart attacks happen there. And then you get anabolic again, and then you can get cancers and things like that. But your heart attacks get a lot rarer once you get into your 80s and 90s. Then your susceptibility is keep away from the cancer cooties.
Wow. So does the full moon increase estrogen, do you think? Or
it definitely increases energy. And though a lot of people will deny that there's effect, I've experimented by sleeping out under a full moon, and the term lunatic is a very real thing. Man, it makes you so wired, you feel like you're on speed or something. So it definitely has an effect. And for all the science saying it doesn't make any difference, I have talked to hospital security guards that say on a full moon, you will see 20 or 30 people being rushed to the hospital for delivery. Other times it's one or two, but we have to be ready for full moon because so many deliveries occur. So yes, now the scientists will say, that ashtray on your coffee table has more gravity than the moon does up there. Well, I'd like to see that ashtray make the Bay of Fundy's tides be 55 feet different from day to night. And obviously, it has an effect on our blood circulation. And so, yes, men are more susceptible to that lunar influence in later years. And women, when they're first ready to have babies and all of that, then yes, they have it. Keep the estrogen down, stay away from the omega-3s and the nitric oxide and the serotonin, lower it, and it will help a lot. And do mind hacking and find out where the trauma is coming from in the first place, because not every woman has that, but a lot of them do, because I still have my problems. I've been mind hacked, but you always can find another trauma that you can get involved in. When I studied with Satchidananda, he told us one time in New Year's, he said, all your old sins are forgiven. Now go out and make new ones.
That's awesome. Yeah, when I worked at Juvenile Hall, I remember I would watch the moon cycle and there were definitely more fights, and the kids just were more jittery and wanting to jump out of their seat during the days of the full moon, for sure.
It makes a real difference. Yeah, there's a lot of studies like that on violence, and the full moon has an effect on it. Yeah, usually the other one that has more effect sometimes is the third quarter of the moon in research that's been done. But yeah, the moon affects a lot of things, and even the new moon affects the tides dramatically. But the full moon is the one that's usually associated with lunatics and lunacy. We get the very lunar from lunatics.
That's interesting. So my friend Zachary, he's actually here in Colorado. He asks, "How old is he?" So your chronological age.
I was born in 1941, before the Second World War.
Wow.
I made a mistake on one show. Maybe it was even Justin's show. I said I was born before the First World War, and someone wrote me, "What the hell?" I said, "Oh my God!" Vibrant gal caught me saying that.
You're a time
No,
traveler.
I wasn't born before the First World War, but I was born in the same year and much earlier than December 7th.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I celebrated the end of the war. We got pots and pans and went out in the street. I was told by my parents, make noise. People made noise. Planes on VE Day and VJ Day or whatever they were. VE Day for Europe, and then Japan, VJ Day. They flew over like flocks of birds after the war in New York City.
Yeah, like I mean, I was born much later in '87, but looking back at like Vietnam and World War I, World War II, and just all that stuff, if we didn't have that, I wonder how much more advanced we'd be without the string pullers playing both sides and IG Farben and all of that. We'd probably have flying cars publicly and all that stuff already. Right?
One of the problems is it depends on what your definition of advanced are, because war, our estrogen is a product of warfare, of poison warfares and poison gases. You'll find a lot of those poison gases are used for chemotherapy, estrogen products, and all kinds of things. Ray Peat has gone into that history extensively, and I hadn't heard that until I heard his research, and it's easily findable on the internet. Not that I don't trust Ray Peat, but I always like to have a backup. So how can you prove that? Ray Peat said it, or Donald Lay said it, or Master Chin said it. I just don't. I don't drive that way.
That's good. Yeah, I know there are some people. I think the flat earther crowd questions whether the atomic bombs or nuclear bombs. Like there are people that believe there's never been a nuclear explosion on the Earth ever, and that's interesting to me.
I wanted to be an astronaut as a kid, so I'm obviously not on the flat Earth side. My heroes were Buck Rogers of the 25th century, Flash Gordon, and then in the early 50s, Captain Video and his Video Rangers. I had my ring, my Ranger ring. Tom Corbett, Space Cadet, Beyond Mars cartoon strips, Twin Earths cartoon strips. I was fanatic about it. In the fourth grade, my teacher told me, unless you know math, you can't be an astronaut. I was devastated. I hate math still to this day. I thought, oh my God, I can't be an astronaut. So I actually believe that they can do these things, and that how do we explain primitive societies? Wade Davis goes into the fact that the islanders that went 4,000 miles from Polynesia to Hawaii and on to the other islands near off South America, Easter Island, etc., they actually had to learn the exact position of the stars, the exact position of every wave and every current and everything in order, and not forget it, so they could get back in the same way. If they took a nap for 10 minutes, they'd be lost because they wouldn't know where they left off and where they began. They had to have an exact replicate. So the human mind is unfreaking believable. Recently, you might have seen in the news that Iraq got back the what is it called? A 4,500 year papyrus. It was actually on stone, written on stone about Gilgamesh. That was a Gilgamesh.
Okay.
And Gurdjieff reported that his father was a bard and that he knew all of those thousands and thousands of words by hand, by mouth, orally, that had been handled down exactly as that tablet for 4,000 years from person to person. And look at us. You have a rumor. I tell you, you tell so-and-so, they tell that, and it ends up a totally different story. They could actually have the ability to do that. So when I hear them say that they can send a Mars lander, and I know people, I was involved with the space program myself, that they can send it to Mars, and they had to make no corrections. The Earth is a speeding bullet. First, we rotate at the equator at over 1,000 miles an hour, and then we're going around the sun at this speed. Mars is rotating at a different speed, and it's going around the sun at a different speed, and that we can end up getting there so that when it turns exactly the rotation to land it, I don't blame flat earthers for thinking this is impossible. It sounds like it, but indeed, it's not green screen. You can go and clearly see 24-hour clocks from the space station. The Indians you know how India got into space? Bicycle. They had to take the first American rocket by bicycle. There were no cars where they were, where the perfect magnetic center of the Earth was for their work. And so they had to take bicycles and even an ox cart to get it going. Then they got their own space program. They're up in space now. In fact, they had the cheapest Mars landing of all the countries. They're the fourth country to do it, and they had it cheaper than they could make the sci-fi movies about Mars. Cheaper than that. It was supposed to be 100 million. They made it for like 80 million or 90 million. So I just believe in it, and I have actually been at NASA, actually argued with the NASA scientists. They were really mad at me. They all started screaming at me because I knew some things in my research that they didn't know, and they didn't want to know it at the time of Clinton. They wanted to think that polynuclear hydrocarbons are not floating around in space, that they're on Mars, because they wanted to finance the space program. I didn't know that. So when I said they're hanging out in space, an astronaut and 3 professors attacked me. He started yelling at me from the microphone. Yeah, sorry, guys. So it's not that NASA isn't duplicitous. They are. We could have been way beyond where we are now. They take their money and use it for satellite surveillance. Since the 1980s, they could read your driver's license for outer space, look through your ceiling with infrared, infrablue, infragreen, infraviolet, everything you can imagine, tell how long you had left your car by the heat level on your driveway, and all kinds of things. And yet they claim, we didn't see that plane in New York that got shot down. We couldn't see it. That's a bunch of bunk. They can see a lot more. That was a technology in 1980. Read a book called Deep Black, I think it's called. It was written back then. And now, you think they haven't increased their technology in 40 years?
Yeah, they often quote Don Petit, I don't know, the NASA astronaut. He says, there's a video clip of him saying, we used to have the technology to go to the moon, but we destroyed that, and it's a painful process to build it back again. But I think that was taken out of context because there's a backstory to that quote, that little tweet that he said. And so people go crazy about that. Like, what? They, destroyed it or blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I went down that rabbit hole for a long time. And I mean, I've looked through telescopes and it's like, are they just projecting planets that we can see through a telescope? It just seems too far-fetched to me. I don't know. I think there's psyops within psyops, and it's the name of the game's to confuse us, right?
In 1953, 54, somewhere back there, I was one of the youngest members of the Bergen County Astronomical Society. We got to look at then the largest refracting telescope, either in the world or certainly in the United States. It was a thrill to look at the moon and the planets and their Mars and everything like that, and the craters and everything. But we had an expert back then said, we won't have a satellite up for 50,000 years, and we won't be on the moon for 100,000 years. Well, he missed the moon by 99,000 for 987 years. So I believe I work for Litton Industry. We help make the guidance and control systems for it. Later, they made the space suits after I left. And I've just been involved with that industry back in the day. And either it's the biggest scam imaginable that they spend trillions and trillions a year on, or, But those flat Earth videos are pretty good. You get to have a deep voice. The Illuminati is what you call it.
Well, I think the black budget stuff seems real, that they're like funneling money into these black underground projects, right? There's probably some truth to that.
There's mega truth. I happen to know a lot of that personally, actually, and I've had friends involved with a lot of that black ops. I know people who do wet work and stuff like that. I met in my day. Yes, deep the CIA and the NSA and the NRO and all these other organizations, the Navy surveillance ones, black ops on drugs and all kinds of other things, weapons, arms, Iran-Contra, the BCCI, all that stuff was run through Arkansas under Clinton, and all kinds of other examples. That's a very real thing. We are not even dream of what's really going on under the surface. And even when I was in the space industry, what a ripoff. I only stole about maybe a couple $1,000 worth of things. That's back in the 60s. Think of the value of how much that would be today. But I know people have backed up trucks and just took stuff away. One guy I know would go in every day with a big thermos and put gold plating in the thermos every day and walk out with it. No one got suspicious. His car's in the parking lot, gold-plated car. All the chrome was gold-plated. You would think they would get suspicious, but people really didn't care. It was money from the government. Doesn't matter if you make a profit or not. So there was a lot of that. Toilets, that one little scoop of toilet cost $800 that you could get for 20 cents at the hardware store. Yeah, that went on. I don't deny that.
Wow. Yeah, my lady is a firearms instructor at a indoor shooting range, and I guess it's some people's job to go in there and collect brass, the brass casings after everyone shoots. And I guess they can melt those down or reuse them or whatever.
Yeah. I'll give you one example of how, McNamara was in the head of defense or whatever it was at that time. Mm. And the company I worked for was run by Charles Thornton, who was fired from Hughes for creative accounting, is what they called it. But anyway, the company I worked for, I read in their little newspaper that they put out that they're buying the largest shipyard in the Ingalls shipyard in Mississippi. I said, what does that got to do with anything? So a few months later, it's announced, Robert McNamara says, we're going to go into the nuclear submarine business. I wonder who's got a shipyard. Oh, my old friend from Ford, Charles Thornton, one of the Ford whiz kids, has a company that just bought a nuclear shipyard. It became the largest business in Mississippi, and I think it still is. Wow. So that's the kind of stuff that went on, buddy, crony capitalism.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you, Adam, about this is a big 180, but the walnut in the morning, from space to walnuts. Now, I wanted to ask you what other nuts do you eat in the morning? Because I think you'd said in previous interviews that like almonds have more omega-6s than omega-3s. Do I have that right?
Yes. In fact, according to Wikipedia, I think, and other sources, they kind of have no omega-3s, which I find hard to believe. I saw other sources where they have very minimal amounts. And the almond is such an important nut. Ironically, the first time I saw a Ray Peat interview where he talks as a lecturer, you may have seen that, when he sits down, he disses almonds, and then the very first person that takes over tells him about the benefits of almonds. So I thought that was humorous. I eat almonds. The other nuts, they're very high in vitamin E. Is one reason I eat them. So they're protected with the vitamin E. Pistachios, too. Pistachios, you notice how they're like glare? They look like eyes. They have visual violet in the coloring of them. They're really good for glare in the eyes in the morning. Cashews are good for teeth. They have anacoric acid in it, which prevents cavities. So there's a bunch of benefits in these, and they're very low in a lot of that. Mostly have monounsaturated fatty acids. And I've been, in my research after doing those 14 books and the compendium now I sell it as, I can't find any damage on the omega-6s. Even Monsanto gets rid of the omega-3s in their soybeans because they clog up machinery, but the omega-6s don't. And the omega-3s are not fed to the salmon. They took it out of their soybeans, but they feed them the omega-6s and they don't get yellow fat disease. I'm more concerned with yellow fat disease, but I don't go looking for omega-6s. Mm-hmm. I certainly would never take an omega-6 oil, whether it was a brilliant seed oil. No, I don't even what is it? There's several black sesame, or there's some popular oil out there now that supposedly, even Ray Peat didn't diss too much, but I just don't have any need for them. Some of those may have value for other reasons, but usually the whole food is better. And for people that aren't going to get their vitamin E and other sources, I'd suggest they go and supplement with vitamin E. A lot of them aren't as good as the vitamin E that used to be, but any port in a storm, we need to our diet now, because of what they take out in farming, the glyphosate and the many other chemicals we don't hear about. We're in trouble. I just wrote a blog, by the way, about the oysters are genetically manipulated now. That they actually are triploid oysters. That's what you buy here in Santa Barbara too. I checked after I read that they used to use a carcinogen to do it, but then they said, "Oh, that's toxic," so they abandoned it. Now they have a way of scalding the gene, changing the gene, and now some kind of CRISPR deal where basically, if they take the animal and take the oyster and take its ability to reproduce away, it converts all that into fat. So you get a big fat oyster. And of course, you sell them by the pound, so you get a lot more money. So now almost all oysters in the industry are triploid, not diploid oysters.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, we recently found a couple oyster places here in the center of Colorado, believe it or not, because they just overnight them. My biggest concern with raw oysters is parasites, because that's a real issue, right? I've opened a lot, and they can look pretty gnarly when you open up an oyster.
When you eat them raw, particularly, and that's how my parents used to eat them. They seem to be okay, but parasites always, when you eat raw fish or any raw meat, people have died from. Yul Brynner got the pork one, the disease, and who else? Some famous people have actually died because they Yul Brynner sued Trader Vic's, I believe it was, over that too, that they served him the undercooked pork. But there's a lot of animals. I have a friend here. I've lost track of her now in Santa Barbara. Used to be a colonic therapist. Why did she become a colonic therapist? She went to the doctor and had a 33-foot tapeworm. A 33-foot tapeworm in her body.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I try to always. Oh, go ahead, Adam. Sorry, there was a delay. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to tell you one little story here because it was so amazing to me. When I studied with Adonal and Alea and Margaret Berry at their school back in Houston, Margaret Berry told me an amazing thing. She said to get rid of parasites like a tapeworm, take a lot of garlic, and then put a warm bowl of milk by your anus. And the tapeworm will come out for the milk. They don't like the garlic, but they'll come out for the milk. She said, do not put them by your mouth because they'll come out your mouth. Now, I thought, it's a tall tale. I put that on Facebook recently, and you may have seen the answer. Someone said, yeah, it happens. And she had a friend that it happened to. And they come out for the warm milk. So you can get them out in various ways. That's one way. I wouldn't do the mouth one. That could be pretty upsetting.
I seem to do well with cigars. Like I've read a lot of studies on tobacco, and nicotine is like a biohacking thing. I think Dave Asprey and all of them have been talking about nicotine as a nootropic and stuff for years, but they really talk down tobacco because smoke causes cancer and all this stuff. But I think if it's not overdone, like you talk about tequila and anything, if it's not overused daily, constantly, chain smoking, it's a completely different animal. And the studies I've read on tobacco against various different parasites are incredible. Like all the different species that tobacco touches, it's broad.
Well, all plants have chemical defense systems, and coffee, the caffeine in it and other chemicals are chemical defense. That's why people say don't drink coffee because it has that. Well, everything does. But nicotine is one of the deadliest poisons of all. It collects it, but when you get minor amounts, it can be used for certain benefits. And there's various ways to take nicotine too. Every once in a while, sometimes for mental problems, you could even once a month or once a year smoke some cigarettes. I had a friend of mine that when he was in high school, he said he got his nicotine craving out every year by he bought a pack of cigarettes and force smoked it for a half hour, smoked the whole thing by inhaling like that. He said, now I'm done for the year. And then a year later we do it. And I knew him long enough that he kept his word. He smoked a pack of cigarettes every year.
Wow. That's hilarious. Yeah, when I worked at a cannabis dispensary down in California before it was recreationally legal. It was like quasi-legal where I had to have them fill out an intake form and stuff at their house. And all my coworkers were doing dabs, like the 97% THC and stuff. And I was over there in the dispensary hand rolling loose tobacco into like tobacco joints. And I was like out on my cannabis deliveries, delivering weed to people. I was smoking tobacco. It was pretty funny. That was my introduction to it.
Everything in moderation. Even I think pot is estrogenic, but every once in a while it's a good medicine for glaucoma, for a lot of conditions, and for pain. A lot of the heroin products can't even keep up with it, and the super heroin products are totally unnecessary. They're just made to kill people. Heroin is fine enough. Morphine, opium, they're available. And cannabis for pain, it's worked for centuries, but they want to make some kind of drug out of it, whether the cannabinoids or whatever it is, instead of the whole plant.
Yeah, we just watched a new PBS show. I think it was like 3 months old on cannabis. It was like an hour PBS special documentary on YouTube. And they highlighted this pharmaceutical cannabis, CBD pharmaceutical product. I can't remember the name. Starts with an E. And I was really surprised. They talked down recreational use of THC, saying, it can actually damage the brain, and they showed MRIs and stuff.
I think it can as a medicine. A lot of people don't know. What is the high from cannabis from? Female frustration. A lot of people don't realize that. In fact, they're trying to sabotage the industry here. There's a war. Right? We're the epicenter right here in Carpinteria of the cannabis industry right now. It's all the greenhouses for flowers that were in Carpinteria have been turned over into pot. The smell is in the air. They have all kinds of, you have to put special machinery in to keep the high school students from smelling it. On and on they go. And the war continues. Every issue of the local paper is about it. But the interesting thing is the vintners were going to place, the hemp. And hemp, you don't need to get the high. But the male, by having hemp within a mile or two, the seeds will blow through the air and turn off the female frustration, and the high is gone. So that's been one of the things they've been planning to do to mess with the growers.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, because the flower buds, it's only the female plants, right?
That's right.
Have the active teeth.
And without the male, they get higher and higher and higher. But as soon as the male comes in, you got hemp instead of pot.
That's interesting. Wow. Awesome, Adam. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground. It looks like it's getting darker where you're at, right? It's pitch black here.
Yeah, did you see the last ray of the sun? It's been raining for the last 2 days, but I was illuminated here for a while.
Yeah, I've been trying to get outside for midday, just even 5-10 minutes just to get naked sun if I can. And it feels great. I think I read being at elevation, we have the advantage. I think Jack Cruz has talked about that. When you're over a certain, I think it's 6,000 or 7,000 feet, you have UV year round, right? Ultraviolet light year round.
Yeah. I was just erasing the sign that appeared. Are you still?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, yeah. ultraviolet light, light is still beneficial for us. And unless you're going to be a yogi, which is it really practical to get buried every 40 days or something like that to me? So for a practical person, I like sunlight. Adon Lay told me that the best way once a year is to be totally naked and expose your entire body, because the tan lines can actually redirect your acupuncture meridians incorrectly. Wow. So you want to tan over your body. When I heard that, I started going to the nude beach down here in Carpinteria, and a lot of times behind the walls, I'd go in and get a complete tan. I used to tan more. Then I read all the scare stuff about cancer. So then I became basically a vampire and turned pale. But then I found the middle road that I learned just before Adana, who validated it. You want to get morning sun, evening sun, and then you get the best benefits, and get about 10 or 20 noonday suns minutes, and then get out of the sun at midday, or wear a hat and all those umbrella things that the Victorian age and a lot of Asians wear.
Interesting. Have you heard of Alexander Wunsch, Adam? I think he's a German, like light quantum biology guy. I'll send you this video if you're interested. It's on Vimeo. It's free. It's 6 years old. It's called How Light Controls Matter. Okay. And he gets me more excited about light than Cruz. And he's a little more humble in his approach.
Well, the light cycle is amazingly therapeutic. And there's 3 levels of it that people don't know about. It's not just the phototherapy, it's the cycle of light. We have something called the suprachiasmatic nuclei. That's the light cycle in our brain. But then we also have the darkness cycle, the lateral geniculate nuclei, and that controls the dark. And then you have the ventromedial nuclei, which controls food. Food is frozen light. So you can actually control it by food alone. That's the whole realm of solar nutrition. Adon Lay called those 3 levels before he named them. I had to go look up those names to see what was controlling what. He said the way to enlightenment is the way of the traveler, the suprachiasmatic nuclei. He didn't use that term. The way of the meditator, that's the darkness cycle through the lateral geniculate nuclei, and the way of the butterfly. And that's the way to eat yourself to enlightenment, by eating foods on time. So all 3 of those exist in the brain, and we can function by those cycles. Like it or not, we have experienced tens of millions of sunrises and sunsets on this planet, and it's pretty much hardwired into us.
Wow. Yeah. Before I moved from Idaho, I was doing a lot of sensory deprivation floating, like in the float tank with, not one photon. And I remember when I first got into it, I didn't have anxiety. Like I could stay in there for 2-3 hours. And I don't know what changed, but I started to get pretty extreme anxiety after maybe 30 minutes in there and complete darkness. I guess it's the stress effect, but I wonder if like I was about to go out of body and that's what was making me anxious. It could have been a lot of things, I guess.
It could be. It's reproducing the uterine traumas like that. And it takes a certain amount of time. So, yeah, there's a lot of, again, Ray Peat said darkness makes a lot of stress hormones. So you do have to be careful doing that. And that's why, how is it? The light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness knoweth it not. You ever rub your eyes and you get phosphenes and you see all these bright lights? Well, those lights can be generated where you can get your own field and you can resonate it with the environment too. So that's a whole science that I just know enough to get in trouble with. So I don't mess with it too much. But yes, we have those abilities. And what you're doing is actually working on your traumas and uterine traumas. And every time you push against that, you can have beneficial results from doing that.
Interesting. Yeah, I had the whole thing, C-section, circumcised, born in a hospital. My mom and my parents did the best they can, so I'm not blaming them, but it's kind of a stressful way to come into this place, right?
Yeah, the doctors, they tell them that they got to do that. In fact, cesareans definitely are multiplied just before Christmas. A lot more of them occur, so that should be a clue that something's going on, that they need more money. I had a friend of mine that was a nurse, and for natural methods and things like that, I forget some of the names of it now. You float in the tank and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And she said definitely cesareans are unnecessary for most people. Only a few people really need them. Otherwise, yeah, what do you call it when you have a natural birth person there that helps you? Midwife. Midwife.
Yeah.
She was a midwife as well as being a professional nurse and all. And many people who came to my soul and nutrition classes were midwives and nurses in El Paso.
Wow. Isn't there like a contraction and serotonin connection? Like serotonin controls contractions.
Definitely. And you can time those things too by, well, one way, I have a buddy of mine, his cousin was born because the sister wanted their kid born on the same day. Castor oil, not a good idea, but it worked. So I don't know what kind of traumas this guy had. But there are ways to time that. And there are better ways when the womb tends to open and close by, the reason Frank A. Brown, who was a professor at a university, he was really the father of chronobiology. But they don't want to give him credit because they want to say it's only in the genetics. If it's synchronizing with the environment, that sounds a little too much like astrology. We don't want to have that in our modern science. But he was right. You could actually... The subtlety of the environment is so great. He went 200 feet underground in the total dark. He took potato plugs and put them in a pressurized tank where they couldn't get any cosmic rays. They couldn't get the same pressure changes because obviously a lot of people can tell the weather change by their knee starts hurting from the barometric pressure. These potato plugs would follow the cycle and could predict the weather a day and a half in advance. With such accuracy. They got together at Cold Spring Laboratory, used to be the Eugenics Center in Long Island, and they basically had a convocation and said, we're going to forget all of that. It's only in the genes. And they demoted Frank Brown, where you can't even find him on Wikipedia anymore. He was the pioneer in it. And now they have Carl... Pettigrew or something like that, whatever, is the hero that came out as the father of chronobiology. It's a bunch of nonsense. The genetics approach is a minor approach because how do they explain the fact that if the genetics control are connected with the light, how do they affect red blood cells? Red blood cells not only don't have any DNA, they don't even have any mitochondria. They don't have anything, and there are no organelles at all. And yet they can be timed outside of the body to resonate with the clock. So anyway, you get a lot of nonsense when people start studying chronobiology as it is now, the Gold Springs Harbor Lab variety. Watch out because raise your pants because it's too late to save your shoes. The BS is right.
Well, you mentioned castor oil, Adam. Didn't Edgar Cayce talk about castor oil? I'm pretty sure. Or?
Tiny bits of it. If you you can actually neutralize some toxins by taking like a drop of it, but it always causes intestinal bleeding. So it's kind of like an aspirin. And in desperation, you can clear the bowels that way. However, you want to clear your bowels. Someone can't go to the bathroom. Drink 4 ounces of olive oil, see what happens. I guarantee you'll be going to the bathroom. There are so many better ways than doing that. So, but if you have nothing else, say I'm in a room, there's nothing but castor oil here, I can't get the olive oil. Then what the heck? If you're, rather than die of a constricted colon, then there might be a use for it at that time. But tiny bits can be beneficial, yes, as a medicine.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are just getting the packs and putting them on the liver.
Castor oil packs. I overlapped you there, but
sorry. The Starlink, is it as beneficial for men as women? Because it could just act on the liver in general, right? Putting it over that area.
Yeah, externally, it can it can actually, when people get what they call Crohn's spine, all the vertebrae fused together. You can do castor oil packs, Apama Christi and all of that, and actually loosen that all up. So they have value. Put them hot castor oil packs on the liver and all of that. I've never done it, but I've had friends that swear by it. And my friend King Kahani so he wasn't a licensed chiropractor. When I lived with them for 2 months in Bellingham, he got every one of my spines, every vertebrae free. And the final one to go, he said, if this doesn't go, he said, do a castor oil pack. But the day before I left Seattle, he got it to move. So my spine, after he worked on me, was so loose that I had the spine of someone young. You can tell that. If you can take a person and drop them and the spine goes, that's youth. But I've worked on people that were in their 40s, couldn't get a single vertebrae with the drop. Now, I'm sure a professional chiropractor, osteopath could figure a way to do it, but the drop did not work on this one woman.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think I heard you on Patrick's show. I think he was asking about hanging, and you mentioned was it pandiculation, I think, and I didn't bring my pull-up bar here to Colorado. I'm really missing that. Just for spinal health, that seemed to be the easiest and most effective thing I've used, even more than the stretcher thing, just hanging from something.
That's another way to go to the bathroom more often. Simply hanging, because it elongates the colon and everything falls into place. By the way, your viewers can't see it, but if you look at my elbow, there is my splenic flexure on my colon on this arm. And there is my hepatic flexure on this arm. And here's a colon like that. You can find the reflexes just like that. And if you take you lie on your back and fold your legs over, you have the intestines. The appendix is going to be closer to the top of your hips, and down by the knee is going to be where the flexures are. And you can go across the transverse colon and work any point. That's called geometric body resonance. It's a lot easier than memorizing this point for that, this point for that, this point for that. You just see the geometry. Look at the scapula. You get 2 triangles. Hips, 2 triangles. Ever get a backache on this side? Just go to the bottom and work that on the bottom, loosens it up. Shoulder aches, free from the hips. Hip aches, free from the shoulder. It's so simple. It becomes laughable than having to go and learn all this science about that. Let's see, heart 7 does this and bladder 47 does that and everything like that. It makes it more complicated. I always like the simple things, so I don't have to. I want to use my brain for other things than memorizing phone numbers and things.
Right, I agree. Awesome, Adam. Well, it's always tough to keep it under like 2 hours with you. I think we're approaching 3. I lost count, but it's always fun. And I think our cadence lately has been every 2 months, which is nice. And I always like closing the year out with you. So going to be one of the last shows of 2021, and I think people always love it. So appreciate you always taking the time and sharing your wisdom.
You too. Thanks a lot, Matt. And any book that I haven't sent you, by the way, I'll comp you, whatever you are interested in. So just go to our website, solartommy.com, and take your choice. I really appreciate you promoting my work here. We need the money,
course,
buy our books.
Of course, yeah. It's a great Christmas present too, I think, to give people that nerd out on this stuff. And whenever people ask me, where do you learn all this? Especially with the omega-3 stuff, I always credit you. Because I remember even when I was selling algae oil and we weren't in touch, but I knew of you and I knew of your posts. I was just like, I was like, who's this Atom Bergstrom guy? And he's so passionate about omega-3s. And eventually I stopped selling algae oil because you convinced me. And that was a pretty violent way of walking away from the industry, because it's a pretty cutthroat industry, the supplement business in general. But it was worth it. Now I'm in kind of the vitamin E business and trying to help people more and cause less harm. And it's nice. So
that's what I admire about you. If you see something's different, you change, and me too. If I find out this is all baloney, but I don't know, 14 books is going to be pretty hard to unconvince me of that omega-3s are not a problem. You can use them temporarily for medications, like for transplants. It shuts off your immune system, so it'll keep you from rejecting an organ gradually. There are points for these as medicines. But as a general rule, to take omega-3s, people get old.
Yeah, and what's that Emmanuel Rivici book that you often reference? Because it's for free, right? If you search.
It's called. Let me see. I'll show you the old cover here. That you viewers can't see it, but that's it.
Okay, research and physiopathology.
Research and Physiopathology as Basis of Guided Chemotherapy with Special Application to Cancer. Always have to look at the title. I've underlined about every word in the book and gone through it over and over, but I always forget the title because it's so long and complicated. But Rivici was a genius, and I regard him as knowing more than even Ray Peat. But Rivici could learn some things from Ray Peat, too, because Ray Peat has come from a different angle, has discovered some of the same things, and I'm really surprised that he hasn't got into a Rivici because much of his data is validated there. Certainly, according to Rivici, polyunsaturated fatty acids, particularly omega-3s, are akin to radiation. If you want to alkalize yourself, do it with omega-3s or radiation, your choice. Rivici was a advisor to the Navy on atomic radiation back in the day.
Wow.
He was an acknowledged scientist and said until he had a non-genetic way of curing cancer. Boy, they censored him. That book, by the way, is available thanks to a guy called That Crazy Pharmacy. And it's easier for me to research that while it's been on the internet than the book. I recommend people look at that book and particularly read the first chapter, which is the theory behind anabolic, catabolic, and the levels of hierarchy in the periodic table, which is actually a reflex chart of each area. Wow. From heavy to light, and that goes from the skin inward to the DNA of the body. So I learned so much from Rivici.
Yeah, I found, I think, what's the website here? Babel.hathatrust.org. They have like a free listing of his books. So I'll post that in the show notes.
Right.
But yeah, the periodic table thing, I think I've seen you hold that up on an interview. And the iodine supplementation people often use that argument that you push out the other halogens by taking iodine supplement, like the bromine, the chlorine. But it seems like it's too much of a simple argument. I don't know. I'm not sold on the iodine.
Yep. You need all of those have a purpose. But in our society, as Ray Peat pointed out, we get plenty of iodine. A lot of people don't know that in dairy, they sterilize even organic, they're allowed to sterilize with iodine because it's natural. Wow. It's organic, right? But that goes into the milk. And then many additives are as much as half iodine. So we get over alkaline, and alkaline above a certain amount of micrometers per year can cause thyroid cancer and all kinds of conditions. Now, say someone's out there, I'm taking 10,000, like Dr. So-and-so said, what am I going to do? If you've only done it for 6 or 8 months, you're probably okay. Just stop. Right. It's the long-term use of it over age that gets you. But probably someone could take those high amounts recommended by certain therapists and get away with it for 6 or 8 months, probably, unless they had some special problem or whatever. But once the thyroid gets adapted to that level, it has to do something with that iodine, and it becomes very toxic.
Makes sense. Yeah. Awesome, Adam. Well, this was great. And yeah, thanks so much. I'll post the solar timing website. And yeah, guys, definitely check out Adam's books. They're awesome, especially Acidifier or Die. That's a great one. But the yellow fat disease ones are amazing. And yeah, I think I've read a lot of the red light one too. That was really good. So yeah, thanks again, Adam. This was awesome.
Thanks for inviting me. Have a great time there in Colorado while you're there, and looking forward to you being back in Idaho.
Oh, I appreciate it. All right, Adam, stick around as I close out the show. Thanks.
Well, that wraps up today's show. I hope you had your notepad handy. I always do, because I get so much information. The closest thing to the kidney is the electric eel. That really stood out to me. I don't know what the implications of that are, but I'm sure someday I'll find out. And his take on popcorn is really interesting because I grew up going to the movie theater, AMC movie theaters in Southern California, and everyone was just megadosing popcorn, especially the people that worked there. Some of them I knew, and they just ate tons of popcorn. And I wonder how much of that contributes to these chronic health conditions that people have, because it's the overconsumption of things, right? You can eat a salmon and get DHA and not have a problem, but if you eat salmon every day for several weeks, several months, several years, that's where the buildup occurs. And I'd imagine the same thing is true for popcorn. So I want to delve more into that with him in future shows. I'm wondering what specifically the problem is with it. Adam's been a huge inspiration in my life. I've been implementing a lot of the things that he talks about, even just wearing certain colors on certain days, like red on Monday, orange on Tuesday. So I'm going to keep up with that for at least a year and report back and see what that did to my life. I definitely think it's doing something with moving traumas and keeping emotions moving. It's a shock to a lot of people that I recently started eating nuts and seeds again. And if you don't know, my history was as a raw vegan. And so I was making a lot of sprouted sunflower seed pâtés and making dressings out of nuts and seeds with a Vitamix and doing the whole thing. And what I realize now is that it was out of balance because it was consuming huge amounts. Like in an almond oil or almond butter, that's way more concentrated than you would ever get naturally. Doesn't mean it's evil or bad, and a little bit is not going to hurt or kill you. But in the long term, I think moderation and the middle path is the way, and it's sustainable. And I like how Adam just eats literally a small handful, a palmful even, of nuts in the morning. He emphasizes soaked almonds the most because he says they're high in vitamin E and have minimal to no omega-3 fatty acids. And he eats 4 pistachios, 1 cashew, and 1 walnut. And I think that's super balanced. Some people might say, why are you even getting anything from that? But I think when you combine it with eating those foods on time, like he talks about, which is in the morning, I think assimilation is better. You need less of the food to get the same effect. And that's been my experience playing around with it just for the last week or two. I've really been enjoying it. And I recommend going to Adam's website. It's sunsyncnutrition.com if you're curious what Adam's about. They have a membership tab, and you can sign up for free and get access to his interviews and research and FAQs. But if you pay just a one-time charge, and I'm not affiliated financially with this, I just really support what Adam's doing. You pay $100 once and you get access to his color recycling video, his food list of over 1,000 foods, solar time calculator, and even some really interesting elixirs that you drink during specific times, like kidney time or small intestine time. And some of the ingredients, I'm really shocked. So in future shows, I'd like to go into that with Adam, because some of the ingredients in those elixirs or meals are quite controversial. I'm thinking the next time we have Adam on the show, we'll really dive really deep into eating foods on time and this whole idea of it's more when you eat than what you eat. Because I feel like he's touched on it a little bit in previous interviews, but we've never really had a full breakdown of it. And especially with my experimentation with it, I think that would be... So Adam's 2 websites are solartiming.com, and that's where he has his blogs, his ebooks. You can buy the Yellow Fat Disease Compendium, which is all of his books on lipofuscin. And if you go to sunsyncnutrition.com, that's where you can access this whole idea of eating on time and get a list of specific foods in specific times. And I just want to emphasize it's not like a form of orthorexia, because he often emphasizes that you can break the rules and that's completely fine. That's life. So it's not about being perfect. It's not about trying to eat 100% on time. It's just playing with it and seeing how you feel and seeing how things digest differently when you eat the same food at just a different time of day. You can check out my website at matt-blackburn.com, and I have all my recommended products up there, the CLF protocol, recipes. I want to highlight one product, the Thera O3 ozone and negative ion generator. This thing's only a little over $100, and you can bring it with you on car rides. And what I like to do is hit the ion button to put negative ions into the car while I'm driving. Like on the freeway, for example, pretty harsh environment, very tiring on the body. And then when I park, like if I'm going to eat with friends or going into a store or whatever, I hit the O3 button, and that actually cleans out the car with ozone, which is ideal to use when you're not in it. And when you get back in the car, it'll smell like ozone. You could just open the windows and it'll vent out pretty quickly. But I think that's a really awesome tool to bring with you in your car that makes a huge difference in energy levels. It has for me. And another way you can support the show is by purchasing Mitolife supplements, and that's mitolife.co. And our PUFA Protect vitamin E just came back in stock. So that's really exciting. That was out for a few months. With the world events, transportation's been slower, even domestically, just production has been slower, getting things moving. So I was really excited to bring these back. It's a mixed tocopherol form of vitamin E in a base of MCT oil. So this is different from your normal vitamin E you would find at your CVS or even Whole Foods, which would have canola oil as the base, or sunflower oil, or some other heavy PUFA oil as the carrier. And usually it's just alpha tocopherol. So this one contains alpha, gamma, beta, and delta, but mostly alpha and gamma. And those two work together to protect your cells from lipid peroxidation. And a less well-known function of vitamin E, people mostly know it as an antioxidant, chain-breaking antioxidant, but it actually protects you from the negative effects of estrogen. It improves mitochondrial respiration, so the mitochondria can breathe better. It protects the skin from ultraviolet light damage. And what's really cool, it actually increases the conversion of linoleic acid into saturated fat. So remember, linoleic is an omega-6, which in large amounts could cause some problems, but not nearly as much as linolenic, omega-3. But what's cool is with those omega-6s, it will actually convert that into saturated fat. I like taking it with a fatty meal, like a steak. It goes really well with. And I noticed that it increases my resilience to stress and helps me bounce back from stress much faster than I could without vitamin E. So it's a really underrated supplement. A lot of people focus on D3, and if they would just cut out their D3 and vitamin A supplements and only supplement K2 and E in the fat-soluble vitamin category, they would see likely tremendous benefits to their health. So I can't believe we're almost to the last show of the year. This year's definitely been a blur. I know it's been stressful for most of us. We already have enough stress in our lives, and then just feel like we're being squeezed now by this weird system with, forced muzzles and all the just insanity that's happening. I think it all comes down to calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis. I think when people have those things, especially in their brain, they can't form a rational thought, and they become like sheeple and they just go along with the program. And the program is to run the consumers through this system as fast as possible, where they make money for the system and work their butt off and rapidly age through the air, water, and food that they're consuming, and then make room for the next worker, and on and on. And it doesn't have to be that way. I think that we're meant to work smart, not hard. And life just doesn't have to be this struggle. I think it becomes a struggle when your biochemistry is off because you've been supplementing iron and supplementing fish oil or algae oil, zinc, ascorbic acid, all the things that they're ramming down people's throats. That's what's causing the imbalance, and that translates over to mental, emotional, and I think spiritual well-being. So that's it. I have to go get ready to see my family for Christmas. Really excited about that. Hope you guys have a good Christmas. As of this recording, it will be that time. So remember to be present with them, put down your phone, have good eye contact, and really focus on just being present with them and really milking everything you can out of those moments. Because I know a lot of our families live out of state, and it's more important than ever that we put down the phone. And it's okay here and there, take breaks, but really cherish your time with your loved ones, because we don't have it forever. That is, unless they're aware of lipofuscin, and therefore they'll age slower. And if you age slower together, you'll have more time for memories. And to me, that's the point of all of this. So Merry Christmas. See you guys on next Friday's show. Stay supercharged.